Well, good morning. This is News Talk 710 KNUS, the Jeff and Bill Show. I am here in Denver, Colorado. Well, technically, Aurora, if we go by the zip codes, but you know what I mean. And Jeff is joining us from Washington, D.C. in a security line as he's trying to get into congressional hearing with Mike Johnston and a bunch of other people today. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
All right, good morning, Billy. You know, we're getting close. It's a big day today. You have the mayors of Boston, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Denver facing a House Oversight Committee to do a lot of explaining about their sanctuary city policies. We're going to be live in the room providing the coverage. We're going through the rigmarole now. It doesn't even begin for another 2 hours. But getting ready, going through security, getting bags checked, and then we'll get our place and get set to bring you that hearing live, probably in a way that no other station in Colorado is going to. So you're going to want to stick with 710K in the U.S. this morning through all this. But, getting ready to head in the big, beautiful Capitol standing right in front of me, Billy. And
excellent.
Man, what a place it was last night.
It was. Now, we've got the hookup because we will be able to bring the hearings later on live, and Jeff will provide commentary as he can through text messages while we are going through it. We'll bring you as much as we can this morning, probably the final 2 hours of the show. We'll bounce in and out and do some phone calls as well. But yeah, let's do a quick reaction before a deeper conversation. What was your thumbnail sketch of last night? What's your elevator speech? What'd you take away from Donald Trump's address to both houses of Congress?
I thought it was incredible. Pedal to the metal. Man, he is just driving forward. So it was in part, celebration of everything he's achieved in the first 40 plus days, first 6 weeks, but then laying out an agenda too of what he hopes to achieve. Some of the great moments were the little boy DJ getting a chance to become a Secret Service agent. That was powerful. And then I was reflecting too. Joe Biden couldn't even pronounce Lincoln Riley's name correctly, and now saying Lincoln instead of Laken Riley, and then to have Laken Riley's family there was incredibly powerful. So I rated a 10 out of 10. It was fantastic speech. Democrats didn't have much of a response, and it was fun to watch. So I was very proud of the president and where we're going to be in 4 years from now, and the impact I think he's going to have. So your thoughts, Bill?
Oh, yeah. I was reminded, to me, it was a campaign speech. It wasn't an address to Congress. It was a campaign speech. And he did all the usual greatest hits, did some of the name calling. I did like the Secret Service kid, the Laken Riley. Yeah, okay. It was nice to honor them. There were a couple of other things that were weird that we might get into later. The family of the firefighter that was killed during the assassination attempt, that was a weird one. And I was also reminded why on a personal level, I dislike Donald Trump's oratory pattern. I don't think he's really that strong of a speaker. And for this to go on so long became trite and was just burdensome at times. I wish someone would give him maybe a thesaurus and get him some new adjectives and adverbs, because everything is either the best ever, the worst ever. Nobody's ever seen it like this. Nobody's ever done something like this. Nobody this, that. There's nothing in between. He's got like 7 adverbs and adjectives, and nothing else, nothing. That's the part that me is. I'm just critiquing oratory style. And in my lifetime, Reagan and Obama were the best. And Biden was not very good. Both Bushes not very good. Clinton was passable. And I just find Donald Trump's oratory style annoying at times. And that's what I got into. And, of course, we got the laundry list of stuff that isn't true. But that's a Trump campaign speech. That's just what we run through with him. So that's just kind of where we're going to start. What we're going to do now, though, is we'll step aside while Jeff is working his way through security, and we're going to check up on everything that we call news with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Well, thank you very much, Billy, and good morning. Jeff and Billy. Jeff in D.C. It's 26 and clear in Denver. Expecting a high of 53 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation. We must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president.
DJT, a big hit with Americans last night in the speech to the joint session of Congress. He's vowing to bring back law and order to America's cities and towns. Trump said he'll fix a justice system that was, in his words, turned upside down by radical left lunatics. Early in the speech, Congressman Al Green from Houston continued to interrupt DJT and yell at 47.
Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the sergeant at arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
And Green was ejected from the chamber. Get out of here.
How can a loser ever
Now that's the great Al Green, not the other Al Green that you saw last night. The not-so-great Al Green shook his cane, started yelling, got his 15 minutes of fame. He thinks Trump is going to ruin Medicare.
I have people who are very fearful. These are poor people, and they have only Medicaid in their lives when it comes to their health care. And I want him to know that his budget calls for a deep cut in Medicaid.
Actually getting the fraud and waste out of Medicare and Medicaid will only help his constituents. He didn't have to grandstand, but he did anyway. And it looked pretty funny as he did it. President Zelensky wrote a letter to 47. He says he's sorry. He wants to sign that deal after all and wants peace in Ukraine. What? And Trump said last night that once again, despite Liz Warren, Pocahontas, wanting to continue the funding for the war, he wants it to end.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense. With no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years?
Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
2,000 people are being killed every single week.
That was Liz Warren clapping. So he turned to his right, with the left, and everyone continued to sit down. But she was clapping during that moment. One of the greatest moments was when a boy from Houston named DJ, who's gone through multiple brain surgeries, has brain cancer, continues to fight it. He wants to be a police officer. He was actually in uniform. His dad held him up so high so the world could see him plenty of times during the speech. The president made it official.
And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
That was a great moment right there. He hugged Sean Curran. And very emotional. But you know what? Messy NBC's Nicole Wallace, she wanted to go to the gutter with this one, with an incredible moment herself.
I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
Wow. What a fraud. You were wrong. You were everything you said right there was wrong. Except for you like seeing DJ hug the Secret Service director. Wow. Results are in after the speech. CNN.
To the results. What was your reaction to Trump's speech? 44% of speech watchers in our instant poll tonight say they had a very positive reaction to Trump's speech. 25% somewhat positive, 31% negative.
Well, that's good news. Hey, locally, a Ponderosa High School student was taken into custody Tuesday after a suspicious device was found in his backpack. The school was tipped off by another student. The device was found, and the school was evacuated out of an abundance of caution. Authorities later determined that the device inside the backpack was an explosive. The investigation is ongoing. News brought to you by Lair Fireplace and Patio, Denver's premier source for everything fireplace, patio, and grills, locally owned and operated since 1954, online at lairfireplacepatio.com. LeBron becomes the first player in NBA history to score a combined 50,000 points in the regular season and playoffs last night. Nuggets and the Kings tonight. 23 in Castle Pines, 24 in Greenwood Village, 26 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue.
How can you live with a broken man?
It's an Al Green Wednesday for Blake Olson News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. I'm Bill Thorpe here in Aurora, Colorado. And Jeff is joining us live from Washington, D.C. He is in the security line, getting ready to go watch Mayor Mike Johnston of Denver testify before Congress. We're going to bring you updates live while Jeff is in the room this morning. But he and I have a chance to chat with you while he's working his way through the security line. He got all the way up to the front of the security line and then was sent to the back of the security line, just like when you were there in the lunchroom line in elementary school. Same thing. Nope, sorry, you got to go back in line. Yeah. Too early. Yeah. You arrived too early. That'll teach you. It's not your class's turn to have lunch yet. Yes, you're here too early.
Right, exactly.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, classic. But, goodness, last night, Bill, you and I were talking off air about the Democrat response.
Yeah, what did you think?
To stand in some of those. So, look, I get on policy discussions or particular political wins that you don't want to stand and clap when the other side is spiking the football, for instance. But there are moments, Democrats, come on, you guys got to stand for the little kid with cancer that just got sworn in as a Secret Service agent. That's one of them. The other one that I noticed they didn't stand for is when they renamed the wildlife refuge for the young woman. I think she was 12 years old that was murdered under an overpass by an illegal immigrant. Take some moments to not be so partisan. And from my perspective, their hatred of Trump literally trumps everything else. Even when you have little boys that have survived cancer, getting a moment to be sworn in as a Secret Service agent, that was so powerful. I don't think I'm ever going to forget that. And I was wondering at the beginning, Bill, Mark Burnett was a close friend of Donald Trump. Mark Burnett, the famed producer of The Apprentice, Survivor. I wonder if prior to these events, if they don't give him a call, because there's a production quality to it, right? The stories that you want to get across, the people you want to highlight, those moments that really get to your heart and soul, those are planned out. And I wonder if someone as talented as Mark Burnett isn't speaking into that.
Yeah, I feel that each time everyone has those moments, every president does, those, what you'd assume to be customary applause lines. And I do, honestly, I didn't go back and look through Biden, Obama, and everybody else, but I feel that both sides have been playing this for quite some time, that there is something that most people would stand and applaud, but because it's announced by the person of the other party, we don't applaud. And I'm certain that we could go, if we go through Obama, we go through Trump's first term, we go through Biden, and we go through the speeches, yes, I'm certain that we could find instances of the opposite party not applauding something like the kid that was named a Secret Service agent with cancer. Yes, it's a bad look, but I don't understand why is the emotion behind it. And the reason why is because this is, and this has become a very, very politicized speech. And we can go back a number of decades as far as the slow evolution of this, but it is ramped up, at least in the past 10, 12 years, to become a very politicized event. And that was more akin to a campaign speech than it was to a State of the Nation speech, in my opinion. So I think that we have set the table for this to be a partisan event. And then afterwards, when we sit here and say the people on the other side didn't stand to applaud this, are we really surprised? Should we be surprised? What's your opinion on that?
I'm sorry, Bill. I'm dealing with security stuff here.
No, that's fine. Go right ahead.
Repeat the question.
No, what I'm looking at is, should we be surprised this has become so political? Because, we kicked Al Green out, but we have had members of the Republicans stand up during Biden's speeches and yell things at him. We had people bring out props during the speeches as well. Is this just the direction we are going? And so I'm curious about why everyone's so mad about the Democrats didn't stand up to applaud the boy that was named a Secret Service agent. Yeah, it's a bad look, but is it really that surprising? Because I would guess that if Kamala Harris was the president and stood there and brought somebody else up in a similar situation, Republicans are probably not going to applaud. You're not going to get the majority of them standing and applauding whatever human interest story that is.
Bill, I don't remember it being so blatant. Obviously, you have the Joe Wilson "you lie," and I felt like the whole world turned against Joe Wilson when that happened, like back in 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
In this case, Al Green makes even a bigger spectacle, and it's just kind of escorted out. And I think Al Green will probably be applauded by the left for his reaction. So my sense is I don't remember Republicans so blatantly refusing to stand at any moment that they were celebrating something that generally should be neutral, like a 13-year-old cancer survivor becoming a Secret Service agent. But I will tell you, my perspective is that it's continuing to get more and more divided, more and more partisan. I don't remember Republicans holding up signs the way Democrats have. I don't remember Republicans dressing in a certain color to send a message. Now, I remember Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert shouting back at Joe Biden, but it seems like the left, from my perspective, is upping the ante when it comes to disruption, protests, signs.
Let me ask you about
messages.
that. Don't you think? Well, I would submit that since Joe Wilson, every year the ante has been upped. Every year what has happened has become more of a spectacle, more egregious. There's been more of it. And I believe next year, and even later this year, if Trump goes back and addresses both houses of Congress, we're going to get more. And then the year after that, we're going to get more. And the year after that, we're going to get more, because you have to do more than what you did last year. And the example I have for that is anybody that's a fan of TV. Have you seen what's happened on The Masked Singer? That used to be a singing competition. Now, I don't even know what the hell they're doing anymore. But because they have to up the ante, they have to do something that's bigger. The costumes have gotten more elaborate and more stupid. The number of contestants have gotten more elaborate and more stupid. The game's barely played anymore because they've had to up the ante. And so I think
Bill,
this is just what happens.
And Michael Steele, I watched MSNBC. You remember Michael Steele, former chairman of the RNC, has now, become a part of the anti-Trump, Lincoln Project world. He was even calling for Democrats not to attend at all. I think that's going to be the next step, you see, is one side of the party is just going to leave the other half of the chamber totally open.
But what'll happen is I don't think they won't show up. What they'll do is they'll stand up and walk out together. That's what'll happen, because that's the visual. The visual of empty seats doesn't get replayed on the TV news the next morning. If everybody stands up like you did in high school when you're leaving the auditorium after the pep rally or whatever, where it's like, okay, your row, and now your row, or fans that go take communion at church. Same thing. When the ushers are kind of your row, your row, your row, everybody takes a turn. That kind of thing. That's what's going to happen because they'll need that visual. And I believe that's coming. In fact, I would be surprised if the Democrats didn't do that sometime in the next 3 years. I think that may be it. They're going to be looking for this visual because, because the issue being is, remember what has been the TV story the next couple of days afterwards. It's been those people that make a spectacle of themselves. It's been those people that got the TV coverage. And so that's what we have incentivized for both sides of the political party. I mean, everybody knows, nobody would know who Joe Wilson is if he didn't sit there and yell, "You lied" at Barack Obama. Nobody would have any idea who he is. And same thing. And I believe that Marjorie Taylor Greene used some of her performative antics to up her credibility inside of the Republican and MAGA universe. And I believe that that's what Greene was doing last night. The signs, for me, the signs were silly. And in part because they were too small. They were so small. There were some execution things that I'm like, those were just, and also the fact is,
and you open yourself up to having them altered.
Yeah,
it's like when Mikey Johnston went out and held a sign in support of a particular legislative agenda. I may have happened to change that sign to say, "Families, do not bring your children to Denver."
Very
danger,
smart.
danger.
Very smart. The other part that got me was all those signs, they weren't universal, which I'm like, that just breaks your message, because it should have been, they should have had 2 or 3 of them, and each one, they should have just given them one. You lie, false, something. Doesn't matter. But the idea that they all would hold it up and they said different things was just... However, this, to me, that also reflected on the lack of ability for the Democrats to control their party like they want to. There was Cory Booker, I guess, had come out, and they had talked about it a little bit, but they had held a meeting yesterday telling all the Democrats to do not do anything like what Al Green did, or hold up the signs. And they had wanted and pressed to not have them do anything, and none of the Democrats paid attention. And I was reading some stuff offline yesterday where there were, I guess, continued conversations through various channels of Democrat lawmakers for days about what they were going to do, but there was no consensus. They didn't settle on an actual plan. Now, if you would have asked them to vote on something, I'm sure they would have all coalesced and voted for whatever the liberal thing is. But the idea is they couldn't come together and figure out exactly what their performative idea of protest was going to be. Okay, question. Do you think, do you think these type of outbursts and protests are going to continue? And two, do you think they are effective? Do you think the Democrats won any hearts and minds yesterday, or were they just playing to their crowd? What do you think?
I think it's effective only in the sense that folks like us talk about it, right? So we're not talking about the content of Trump's speech. And I know we will get there.
Yeah, we will.
And we have a 4-hour show, so we'll be covering a good portion of that. But for instance, it gave MSNBC yesterday the ability to talk all about that and not address the content of Trump's speech, which is, really, really important. I thought it was great. He covered so many issues, from energy independence to Ukraine to tariffs, Canada, Greenland, Panama, even the social issues and men and women's sports and all that stuff. So it was a broad, wide, sweeping speech. And so it's effective in the sense that the next day, what are people talking about? Al Green, the cane, Democrats not standing. So it becomes an effective counterpunch for the Democrats in that way. But as far as winning hearts and minds, where people are looking at that going, that's the party I want to be a part of. It's not inviting. It's not appealing. It looks more bitter than anything else. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that critique holds for both sides when they're out of power. I don't believe that any of the things the Republicans did during the speeches of Joe Biden persuaded anybody other than current Republicans. I think it's a very bad idea as far as outreach. You're not going to convince anybody. But I think you're right that it does allow them to basically set the agenda for many of the media the next day, and especially on the media that covers their side of things, because MSNBC is going to be super proud of Al Green and super proud of all the Democrats. And Fox News was really proud of Marjorie Taylor Greene and other Republicans that caused a scene during the Biden speeches as well. So I think you're right that as long as these are the things that get attention because they are the unexpected and unusual, they will continue to happen. Because, again, how many of us would have known that Al Green is a Democrat from Texas if we would have asked that question yesterday morning? Now, most of us could pick his face off of a cereal box. And that's what I think part of this is about, is also, basically getting the attention to say to your party also that I'm important because I will take these difficult steps and I will get the attention. Al Green's going to get as many interviews as he can over the next 14 days, and that's going to be part of it because of what he did. So in many ways, we are, if you talk about it being a classroom, we are encouraging the class clown, because after the class clown acts up, he gets interviewed by the school paper. He gets a moment during the morning announcements to talk about what he did, and everybody in school is talking about how the class clown disrupted the teacher's presentation. And I think that's a problem. Tell you what, Jeff, while you're working through security, are you working through security? What are you doing?
Yeah, we're getting close. They're supposed to open it at 8:30. So we're getting, which is 6:30 your time. Why don't you do Colorado Wound Care now? Because I think once we get into later, we're going to carry the hearing live. We're outside of the United States Capitol. Mayor Mike Johnston is joining mayors from Boston, Chicago, New York, and explaining sanctuary city policies and their impact. So we're going to provide live coverage of that, but that's going to kick off at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. But, Bill, this might be a great time to tell folks about Colorado Wound Care.
Yes, I will take a moment, and then we'll take a commercial break, and then we'll get back to Jeff out in front of our Capitol right now. I want to talk to you about a new advertiser, Wound Care Associates of Colorado. They've signed up with us because of something that had happened in Jennifer Walker's life. Jennifer Walker is the founder and owner of Wound Care Associates of Colorado. Her uncle was getting older and had some comorbidities, diabetes, neuropathy, and he developed a small cut on one of his toes. You know, he's dealing with other medical issues and getting around and things difficult. Is that cut really a big deal? It doesn't seem like it. But that little deal turned into a really, really big deal. Because if you don't fix and heal that slow healing cut, that diabetic ulcer, that pressure sore, what happens is that tissue, skin, stays open, and it's the perfect place for dirt, germs, and bacteria to get access to your body. That's what happened to Jennifer's uncle. He thought the cut was just going to be slow to heal, as it happens when you get older. You know how you get new scrapes and cuts, and all of a sudden it takes weeks instead of days to heal? How many extra days you putting a Band-Aid on that thing? And don't tell me about the scars that happen afterwards. So you kind of expect it. That's why you ignore those slow-healing cuts, diabetic ulcers, and pressure sores, because that's just what happens when you get older. But in Jennifer's case, what happened with her uncle is that small cut got infected. By the time he sought medical attention, it was really bad. So bad they had to amputate part of his foot. And that should have solved the problem, but didn't, because the infection had spread. And it got so deep, it had already gotten so deep into his body, it took his life several days later. Yes, it was the small cut on his foot that took Jennifer's uncle's life, not any of his other comorbidities. That's why you don't mess around. You've got those slow-healing cuts, those diabetic ulcers, those pressure sores. You, someone in your family, you need to talk to Wound Care Associates of Colorado today. Reach out to them, coloradowound.com, coloradowound.com. The reason you talk to them is because they're the best in the business. They do it differently than everybody else. First of all, they go old school. It is concierge-style service without the concierge price. What it means is you go to coloradowound.com, schedule your appointment. They're certified. Their wound certified nurse practitioner comes to your home and sets up an entire treatment plan in the comfort and privacy of your home. Yeah, it's that easy. No transportation issues. You're not walking into another medical facility where you could be exposed to somebody else's dirt, germ, and bacteria. No, you're just there with your own filth. Okay, I'm teasing you. But that's the idea, is you're there at home and their wound-certified nurse practitioner comes in and gives you the treatment you need, sets up a custom treatment plan, and they are focused on better healing outcomes. Too many wound care facilities here in Colorado are just focused on maintaining that wound, which means leaving it open and just cleaning it. Some negative things happened to my aunt. You've heard me talk about it. When that happened to her, she spent weeks and months inside the hospital because of a disease she was exposed to while getting her wound maintained. That's not how Wound Care Associates of Colorado do it. They want to make sure to maximize healing. They want to close that wound because then it keeps the dirt, germs, and bacteria out. Don't mess around. If anybody in your family has this kind of a challenge, a pressure sore, a diabetic ulcer, a slow healing cut, don't mess around. Contact Wound Care Associates of Colorado. They're the best, and they're the ones that are going to make it heal. coloradowound.com. coloradowound.com. Ignoring the problem or maintaining the problem doesn't fix the problem. Reach out to the people that are going to fix the problem. Wound Care Associates of Colorado. coloradowound.com, coloradowound.com. And when you do, tell me you heard about him here on the Jeff and Bill Show, because it helps us out as well. We're going to be right back and check in with Jeff, who's outside of our capital, getting ready to watch Mayor Mike Johnson of Denver testify about sanctuary city policies, along with the mayors of Boston, New York, and Chicago. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Denver's Talk Leader. We are News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm Bill Thorpe here in beautiful and slightly chilly Aurora, Colorado. Jeff is braving the elements out in front of our Capitol as I bring him up live on the phone. He is waiting in the security line. They are going to search his person in just a little bit so he can get into the Capitol and give us live reports from the Mayor Mike Johnston testimony. Now, it'll only be through text message because he can't speak during the actual hearing, but we will bring you portions of the hearing live here on KNUS. Mayors from Denver, Boston, New York, Chicago all testifying about sanctuary city policies. Jeff, what's the crowd like out there so far?
Well, I'm in line with every eighth grader that's come to Washington D.C. to tour the sites. So it is it's a unique opportunity. I've got to work my way through multiple levels of security and badging and all that stuff to get in there. Something tells me if I was Kyle Clark, I would be treated differently. I think they would usher me in and be happy to have me here. But as for 710K and US and the rest of us, we're in line with the eighth graders.
Hey, that's fantastic. You guys should be exchanging friendship bracelets. Do they still do those things? I think they do some bracelets. Should have brought those.
And talking T-Swift.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Right.
Hey, Jeff, we got a phone call, and Nick from Inglewood is giving us a ring, so I want to bring him up. Unfortunately, Nick did not watch the speech last night, but Nick, so far this morning, what have you heard about Trump's speech? What impressions have you got from media that you've been exposed to at dark 30 in the morning?
Boy, been trying to keep up with everything that's been going on, but mostly I'm just listening, and I'm definitely interested to see what happens today with the Congress inquiry into what's going on here. I still am blown away by the fact that the state that city is in, that there's any inclination to raise any monetary, expectation of somebody who's still willing to go down there. So whatever that 20% thing was, I can't wrap my head around that. I beat my head against the wall yesterday so hard. That's why I forgot to watch the Trump video, because I was trying to wrap my head around that thing, and I ended up having to do some drywall work.
Oh, man. Now, Nick, let's talk about that for a sec. So Nick is referring to Mayor Mike Johnston of Denver's plan to help revive downtown Denver restaurants. And his genius plan, I'll use that in air quotes, is to add a 20% gratuity or tax, or use whatever you want to, on top of your bill. So when you walk into the restaurant in downtown Denver and pluck down your hard-earned cash to get some of their delicious food, it's going to cost you 20% more. Nick, now you're out there hanging drywall. What would happen to the business that you're working for if all of a sudden someone came in and added a 20% tax on top of what you guys are doing? Does it make it more or less affordable? This is an easy one.
I guess it would just, I would have to say that you'd have to look at basically what's already happening, and we're always paying more and getting less. So I guess it's just a business model. Just follow suit.
Now, Nick, I got a question for you. What do you think about the idea of the person that is in charge of the finances of Denver, and their solution to help the businesses downtown is to make it more expensive for the customers? What does that tell you about the idea there?
One thing I did come across recently was music, and I guess this was going on for a while. I don't know if it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but they had some sort of a pass where you could buy, for one night, you'd have access to 7 or 10 different clubs that were all within walking distance of each other, and go out and just kind of roam the whole city. And, I think that would be a good way, provided that there was some sort of security, maybe even a private company, some people that you're just kind of hanging around. Maybe you don't even know who they are. And then you just know, hey, there's at least a few people around, other than the police that maybe, are here to help a little bit. But, getting people out, I don't think that that's going to be accomplished by just taking their money before you even give them anything, really, So maybe try to offer something up, even if it's just like moral support or something, or emotional support. Like, hey, we've got a couple extra people down there. You won't know who that, but I will say one thing. I see the randomness of some of the stuff that goes on here recently. Yeah. And I have a hard time asking myself if that's ever going to happen to you if you know, like completely random violence is very rare. I'm just going to say.
True.
There's usually something else going on. So I go down anywhere in the city and I feel fine. I feel pretty comfortable by myself, you know, and I guess I'm 6'3", you know, anywhere between 140 and 250 pounds, depending on how much drywall I'm hanging, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, so I don't know. I guess one thing that came across my mind recently was I don't and probably never will know what it feels like to be a small woman who wants to go out and you know, walk down the 16th Street Mall or through an alley, you know, for that matter.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I am usually. Nobody's ever in there unless they know where they're going, and that's whatever. So I don't know. I that's fine for me, walking through the dark alleys of Broadway at any time of the day or night. I can't imagine not being able to walk down the 16th Street freaking mall.
Yeah.
So that's got to change. You know,
security. You're right, man.
Yeah, let's get that 20% rolling into something that we can see. I guess that's, you know, that would be my main question is show me what you did with that 20%, you know, maybe that's a start, because that hasn't happened. And I don't really, it's hard to get a straight, honest answer out of these people.
Oh, it is. I like it now, Nick. I like what you're saying there, and thanks for the phone call. I like what you're saying there about the pass that was available to go to different clubs, and you'd pay a fee, because that's an incentive for behavior, where an extra 20% is a disincentive for behavior. And I honestly think there's something there where if you offered some sort of a deal where you would have a flat rate, and then you were allowed to start off at appetizers at one restaurant, and then you would go and have a choice of, let's say, 1, 2, or 3 different entrees at another restaurant that could be wrapped in. That's kind of what they do for Restaurant Week, and it's what they did for Jeff and I when we were out at the IHOP in Greenwood Village. They took some of their regular menu items and discounted them. Yes, there were 2 that were available for $7.10. You could order off the regular menu if you wanted to, but that's the kind of deal that I'm imagining. Pick out 1 or 2 items that you want to feature, 1 or 2 that you can take that discount on for a set amount of time in an evening, and that's the entrance for people to come out and try the restaurant and get people back downtown, because you're making it more affordable, and you're looking at economic dynamism. Because if I go to the first place and have appetizers and drinks, I go to the second place and we have the entree but drinks aren't included, I might stick around, I might have 1 or 2 extra drinks, and then I may swing down, and if you offer me my first drink free at another bar or something else there, done. That's it. And if I'm in that bar and I've gotten the first drink for free, we're going to have more. And hopefully we're taking an Uber or something home, or we have a designated driver or whatever it is, or we're riding the light rail, which can be sketchy late at night, because I know that. But I'd like that idea of going in and incentivizing people to spend more time downtown. Now, Jeff, are you going to have time to play with us to do You Choose the News as you are working your way through the security line?
Yes. Good and committed.
Excellent. All righty. Well, hey, stay right there. Do not get body cavity search, because we're going to need your participation in just a sec. I'll get to the text messages. You want to give us a ring like Nick did, 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. What did you think of the performance antics of the Democrats last night? Are we going to move beyond this, or do you think it's just going to get worse? Also, I'm really curious, what was your top moment in Donald Trump's speech last night? What was the thing that really resonated with you? If you had to turn to someone that didn't watch that speech last night and said, you got to see this, what's your this? 303-696-1971. We're doing You Choose the News in just a moment. You're listening to Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS. Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Jeff is live at our U.S. Capitol in D.C., waiting for Denver Mayor Mike Johnston to be called in front of Congress. He's there with the mayors of Chicago, New York, Boston, to explain themselves about the sanctuary city policies. But it's party time. You know what that means? It's time for You Choose the News. Yes, it's time for America's favorite fake radio news game show. I've scoured the interwebs for moments this morning to find really dumb stories about us humans, giving them even more ridiculous headlines to play this fake radio news game show. Why? Because nobody in charge has any idea we are this irresponsible. A lesson learned by all. Alrighty, Jeff Hunt joining us from our very own Capitol, and Blake Hunt in the newsroom. I got to say it like that, Blake, because he's in D.C. You know how it works. Okay. Alrighty, gentlemen, here we go. Here are your stories this morning. Headline number 1, thinking big, starting small. Headline number 2, worst party favor ever. Headline number 3, clearly not following instructions. And headline number 4, politician goes back on campaign promise. Mr. Hunt, your choice, sir.
Let's see what that politician's doing.
Yeah, politician going back on a campaign promise. Here we are traveling to New South Wales. The newly elected government has dropped a commitment to remove nearly 10,000 digital poker machines from across the state. Now, why? Well, the parliamentarian said, well, yeah, we wanted to do this and we promised to remove them because people were playing too much poker and stuff, but we found out that it won't do much good. They actually, when they did the investigation, found out that most of the time it is a small number of people that are playing for really long stretches. So removing all the machines would be expensive, costly, and those few people would just find another machine to play on. So the politician's promise that he'd been doing the entire campaign trail, he's like, yeah, guess what? I was wrong. Surprise! I know. If only Biden could have learned that early on. Alrighty. Now, Blake Olson in the newsroom, sir. Your choices. Thinking big, starting small, worst party favor ever, or obviously not following instructions?
Worst party favor ever.
Yeah, worst party favor ever. We are traveling to Texas right now. You may have heard we have 146 cases of diagnosed measles in Texas right now. These cases have been reported since late January, and it's going to get worse because brilliant parents are now hosting measles parties, getting kids that have been exposed together in order to infect more of them, which is really stupid because 1 in 20 kids that is exposed to measles, that develops measles, gets pneumonia. And that can be really serious. About 1 in 100 develops encephalitis, which is swelling of the brain and can be deadly. Both the pneumonia and the encephalitis can kill you. This ain't like a chickenpox party, you rock-eating morons. Measles parties, worst party favor ever. I don't think, seriously. You don't. It's the most contagious viral disease on the planet. It's ridiculous. Alrighty, Jeff Hunt, final choice as we're running out of time. Thinking big, starting small, or not following instructions?
Thinking big.
Thinking big, not starting. Thinking big, starting small. The colossal bioscientists have just created the woolly mouse. They're trying to bring back the woolly mammoth, and they've altered the genes in a mice so to make sure that they are representing like a woolly mammoth. They're going to try it with an actual elephant next year. That's the end of You Choose the News. We'll be back in just a moment to get your thoughts on the speech last night. 710 KNUS. our motto, powered by questionable decisions. So many. In fact, they let me be in control this morning because I'm going to bring up my partner, Jeff Hunt, who is joining us live from our nation's capital in D.C. He is waiting for Denver's Mayor Mike Johnston to be called in front of a congressional hearing that Lauren Boebert is a part of. Mike Johnson is featured along with the mayors from Boston, New York, Chicago. They got some splaining to do about sanctuary city policies. So Jeff's going to be in the room. We'll bring you all the flavor of that tomorrow as well, and we're going to have some of the portions live. But we also want to talk about Donald Trump's speech before both houses of Congress yesterday, and especially what your top moment was. What was the one takeaway that you felt was the most significant, the most resonant? Now, Jeff, I want to get to yours in a second, but prior to you choose the news, we had caller and listener Joan from Lakewood that rang in, so I want to honor her time and the fact that she hung out on hold and had to listen to you choose the news. Thank you so much, Joan. Good morning. What was your favorite moment during Donald Trump's speech last night?
My favorite moment was when Trump announced the arrest of the terrorist who killed 13 Americans in the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Yeah, the Abbey Gate. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was brand new news, and it was one of those things that reflects how Trump has relations across the world to get these people back. And the other thing that was interesting was the little black signs the Dems were holding up and how they won't do that again. I think it's the funnest meme you've ever seen. I really think that I don't think they'll do that again.
Yeah, that was dumb. They were too small. They weren't all saying the same thing. It was silly. It looked like I would say a middle school craft project gone awry. Lack of creativity, lack of execution, and also the signs are just way too small. For me, it made the Democrats in that moment look very small, because that was the protest they tried. I thought it was just poor form. I didn't like it at all. Although I agree with you on the announcement of the terrorists that masterminded the Abbey Gate bombing. That was an amazing moment. That was one where I wish Trump would have, rather than going backwards and talking about Biden and the horrible withdrawal, I wish he would have highlighted what you talked about, his influence and ability to get this done working with people across the planet. Because understanding, I see that they got the guy with help from Pakistan. Now, Pakistan wasn't always playing nice with us when we were inside of Afghanistan. They were kind of playing footsie with the Taliban and letting people cross back and forth. And so the idea of Trump leaning in and saying, this is how we were able to secure this. We were able to leverage this. We were able to reach out. And this was a joint operation because of X, Y, and Z. That's a powerful moment. In fact, I think it resonated much like when Obama announced the death of Osama bin Laden. Because it was a surprise, I like how Trump sprung that on everybody. It's not the surprise I was hoping for, but yeah, I would agree with you. That is one of the most powerful moments of last night's speech. Jeff Hunt, what did you think about that moment?
All right, so Donald Trump. Let's go through what this guy was able to deliver last night. This was one of my very favorite moments, okay? When he started talking about becoming the most dominant civilization in the history of the earth, that we were going to plant the American flag on Mars, fight for our country. And this was, remember how he wrapped up? The golden age of America has only just begun. For me, I'm calling it the pedal to the metal speech. He is putting it all down, driving forward. It was optimistic, inspiring, emotional, everything from the kid with cancer that survived cancer and is now a Secret Service agent, to the kid that got accepted to West Point, to the announcement that they caught the terrorist mastermind, to the families. I want to go back to this again, Bill. Joe Biden could not pronounce Laken Riley's name last time correctly. And this time, her family was there. It was the first act he signed. This thing was America to its core. It was brilliant. It was a 10 out of 10. It was inspiring. And it, I think, fired up the country for what the next 4 years are going to look like. Now, I had to look this up. What's the difference between a joint address and a State of the Union? Well, a State of the Union is supposed to reflect on the last year, and since Donald Trump hasn't been in office the last year, it wasn't technically a State of the Union. But similar to what Ronald Reagan did, laying out that vision for what the next 4 years are going to look like, the president had strength, he had vision, he had focus and determination. The Democrats looked small, they looked disorganized, they looked on their heels. You had an angry old man, like out of The Simpsons, yelling at a cloud at one point. So it was a big win for the president across the board, and it was fantastic to watch. Made me proud to be American.
Joan from Lakewood is still with us. Joan, I got to ask a little bit about what Jeff had just talked about with Al Green standing up and yelling and screaming. Do you think, now we can all agree that what the Democrats did is really not acceptable and didn't put them in the best light. But they're not the only ones that have done it. We have Republicans that have done similar things, not exact, but they've disrupted the speech in the past. The question I have for you, Joan from Lakewood, one, do you think this sort of disruption is going to continue by either party when out of power? And then two, do you think it helps either party when they're out of power being disruptive during these speeches? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I was sitting here thinking it couldn't get any worse. And then I think in Poland they were shooting off flares and those colored bombs in the air.
Yeah, smoke bombs and stuff, yeah. I think that was Croatia, but yeah, somewhere in there. It's Eastern Europe, yeah.
Yeah, and I was sitting here going, wow, that's just, how can it get any worse? But I honestly and sincerely think that the fact that we can say they sat on their hands and they didn't clap. They didn't clap for a kid with cancer. At some point, somewhere, someone is going to wake up and say, hey, wait a minute. We really look mean. We really look hateful. We really look like we have extreme feelings about Donald Trump should not be there, kind of thing. So,
do you think that is just that? Do you think that's just politics, or do you think that is going to resonate with the larger electorate? And the reason that I ask that is because I'm of the opinion that regardless of the party that does that, the people that are of that party applaud it and think that it is strong and that they're pushing back, and people that are on the other side of the aisle that aren't in that party believe that they're acting small and acting like kids. I think the actual party is irrelevant. I just think that's how it is viewed by either side, and those people that are in the middle and persuadable aren't persuaded by either side doing those kind of things. Do you think it's just, is that a fair assessment that if it's your side doing it, you think it's a great thing? If it's the other side doing it, it's not a great thing. But more importantly, it's not going to win you any votes when you're out of power, regardless of which side is doing it.
I didn't like when Marjorie Taylor Greene shouted out, and I don't think that it is something that resonates. Yesterday, supposedly 2,000 Democrats went down and protested at the Capitol, and it's one of those things where I think the difference between a protest and a rally is that the rally is very similar. Somebody said to me, well, it's just like a rally. He's just out there whipping up the people, and it's like, well, he's whipping them up with good intentions. And that might be the difference between a protest and a rally. So I think that it's going to stop and get better because I see people around me just not reacting to that kind of thing anymore.
Oh, Jonah, from your lips to God's ears, I hope you are right that this kind of thing is going to stop. And I love the fact that, and thanks for the phone call, I love the fact that you talk about the people around you aren't being impressed or persuaded by that. I think that's the way you stop this. They're going to still get the camera and media attention, but if people aren't persuaded and they're not stopped by it, they're not going to vote for that side. I think that can stop it. I like what you're thinking there, Joan. Thank you so much for the phone call. You can jump on Joan's phone line, 303-696-9100. 1971, 303-696-1971. What Jeff and I want to know this morning is, what is that number one highlight for you during Donald Trump's speech last night? If you ran into someone that had just come out of a coma this morning and you're like, oh my gosh, Donald Trump spoke last night in front of both chambers of Congress, and they say, what happened? What do you point them to? Where do you start them on that video? Do you turn to them and say, you've got to see this? What's your this? 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. But now it is time for Blake Olson to bring us news and comment. Good morning, sir.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Hey, good morning, Billy and Jeff in D.C. 26 and clear in Denver. Expecting a high of 53 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story.
And we have ended weaponized government where, as an example, a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent, like me. How did that work out? Not too good. Not too good.
Okay, that may have been my favorite moment right there. It's absolutely incredible what he has done. DJT crushed it again last night in the speech to the joint session of Congress after 43 days, only 43 days in office. He's vowing to bring back law and order to America. Trump said he'll fix a justice system that has been turned upside down by radical left lunatics.
How can a loser ever win?
Al Green was there, not that Al Green from Houston, who stood up and continued to heckle, interrupt, and disrupt the speech.
Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant at Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
And Green was ejected from the chamber. He's worried about Medicaid and Medicare.
I have people who are very fearful. These are poor people, and they have only Medicaid in their lives when it comes to their health care. And I want him to know that his budget calls for deep cuts in Medicaid.
Actually, getting the fraud and waste out of Medicare and Medicaid will only help his constituents in South Texas. Elon and Doge was received well by Republicans, of course, and the president ripped off some of the fraud.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million.
Wow. President Zelensky wrote a letter to 47. He read it and says that he's sorry. He wants to sign that deal. He wants peace in Ukraine. Trump said last night that once again, it's time to stop funding endless wars around the world, despite what Dizzy Lizzie Warren Pocahontas wants. She's one of the ones you'll hear clapping in this cut.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense. With no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes. 2,000 people are being killed every single week. More than that.
One of the greatest moments was when a boy from Houston named DJ, who's gone through multiple brain surgeries, fighting cancer and surviving his brain cancer. He wants to be a police officer. He was wearing a uniform. His dad held him up high so the world could see him. It was awesome. The president also made something official.
And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
And the Dems sat on their hands. What did the American people think? CNN.
To the results. What was your reaction to Trump's speech? 44% of speech watchers in our instant poll tonight say they had a very positive reaction to Trump's speech. 25% somewhat positive, 31% negative.
And then also on Tuesday, there was data released that says that Trump's approval rating among 18 to 36-year-olds is 60%. 60% young people. Democratic Party, as we know it, is dead unless they make radical changes, i.e., act like conservatives until they win elections. They are dead. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston in a congressional hearing today with the Oversight Committee in D.C. talking about sanctuary cities and how they destroy cities. Jeff will have more later this morning and tomorrow. Of course, he is right there in the room. A Ponderosa High School student taken into custody on Tuesday after a suspicious device was found in his backpack. The school was tipped off by another student. The device was found and the school was evacuated out of an abundance of caution. Authorities later determined that the device inside the backpack was an explosive. The investigation is ongoing. LeBron becomes the first player in NBA history to score a combined 50,000 points in the regular season and playoffs. Nuggets and the Kings tonight in lower downtown Denver. It's 23 in Brighton, 24 in Centennial, and 26 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue.
I can still feel the breeze that rustles through the trees.
It's going to be a nice day today. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Jeff and Bill Show. You're listening to Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS. I am Bill Thorpe. Jeff Hunt is joining us live from Washington, D.C. He is inside our nation's capital. He's going to have a front row seat when things are about to go down later today between Mayor Mike Johnston of Denver and Lauren Boebert's committee. Now, she's just a member. She doesn't lead the committee, but she's going to be there being ready to give Mike Johnson the what for on sanctuary city policies. But right now we're talking about Donald Trump's speech last night. Joan from Lakewood just called us and said, talked about her highlights, the thing that was the most important to her, the capture of the terrorist mastermind behind the Abbey Gate bombing in Afghanistan. That was quite a shock and surprise. That, for me, I would absolutely put that as far as a highlight. Jeff agreed. We also talk about the young kid who survived cancer being named as a member of the Secret Service. Those are fantastic. So we want to know, what is your highlight of the evening? 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. Jeff, you said that they have taken you from one line and you're going to a different line.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's very exciting as we wait. This is like,
yes,
an MMA fight among politicians, right? Mayor Mike Johnston, Lauren Boebert, and Mayor Mikey's got to defend his sanctuary city policies that have cost the city of Denver $356 million. And in preparation for today, he has paid Covington and Burling, one of the top law firms. In fact, Joe Biden's former White House counsel $2 million in order to defend his sanctuary city policies. So he's coming with a very big team today. And then you're going to have House Republicans. And, this could go one of few ways. This could elevate Mike Johnston on the national stage and he becomes, a pretty prominent Democrat, or like the presidents of Harvard, Yale, and Penn, it could be career-ending for him. So we're all going to be watching this, and we're going to take the live feed starting at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, and you'll be able to listen to the committee hearing on 710 KNUS. But Bill, last night, President's speech, lots of activity here in Washington, D.C. around that. It's a big night for politics. But you know what I found kind of interesting was that Ukraine almost seemed like a footnote last night, right? It wasn't a major focus of his speech. He highlighted the fact that Zelensky's kind of done an abrupt U-turn, come back and talked about how great, Donald Trump is, his great leadership, all that stuff. He's ready for peace. But he probably spent 30 seconds on a almost 2-hour speech on Ukraine last night. Did you find that interesting?
Yeah, that was interesting. The other part for me was that Trump came forward and repeated his usual lie, and it is a lie that he's using right now, that the U.S. has spent more money and spent more as far as aid to Ukraine than Europe has. Last night, his number was $350 billion. That's not true. The U.S. has sent $115 billion. So basically, he more than doubled it. Which is weird, but he has a habit of doing that. He does that a lot when he talks about impact or achievements. He basically doubles the number. We went from 11 million illegal immigrants likely to 22 million during the campaign. He doubles that a lot based on it. And the U.S. has got 115 billion. Based on my research, the European Union has sent 130 billion. So again, it's closer than he leads you to believe. The U.S. Is half of what he says the support we sent was, but is his bottom line about the U.S. sending vast amounts of treasure and support more than Europe, and Europe didn't step up. It's not a true narrative. But I was surprised that he didn't bring it more to the forefront, especially after Zelensky tried to make nice yesterday. So after Zelensky's like, it's time to make this right, I believe was the statement that he said in the tweet. And I was really shocked that Donald Trump didn't lean into that more, because he likes the dominance. And he had been asking as recently as yesterday for Zelensky to make a public apology on television to Donald Trump, the White House, and the American people before he would talk to him again. But I don't know if that's going to continue. But I was surprised that it was only 30 seconds in nature at best versus how dominant that has been in the news cycle over the last few days. Now, what I want to do is, Jeff, is I'm going to step here. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
And I want to ask you, too, about Greenland, the appeal to Greenland and Panama. So he's talking about these other smaller areas, and then he gets into tariffs with Mexico and China, a little bit with China and Canada, but not a lot of talk about China as an aggressor, Russia as an aggressor. I think you could see policy-wise with like the Office of Shipbuilding that he's taking them seriously, and he wants to be able to match particularly China's Navy capacities. But you didn't see confrontational language coming from Donald Trump last night towards Russia or China. Your thoughts?
That was weird, because confrontational language was reserved for Panama and Greenland. That was bizarre. The countries that we view as allies. And so that I think is a reset of international relations, and it is shocking. And again, I go back to the party of Reagan, that the party of Reagan now has a president that is attacking our allies and ignoring or even playing friendship games with our largest enemies. We know that Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has directed the Department of Defense to stop any cyber activities focused on Russia. To stop them. That's crazy. Well, we're just going to not do anything. Okay. If that isn't a change in foreign policy, I'm not sure what is. That wasn't highlighted last night. Donald Trump didn't use that as a moment to spike the football, but look at the great things. We're now, and it also, I think, impacts the U.S. version around the world, because when that announcement is made, all intelligence services in the Western world looked at that and went, oh. They get a feeling about who we're being friends with and who we're not, especially when it talks about, having Greenland one way or another. That's a weird one, a very strange one. And the idea of America
Bill,
taking back the Panama Canal.
Bill, I'm getting some little insider information here. Lauren Boebert is going to be one of the very first to ask questions.
Excellent.
So we are standing outside the committee room, getting ready to go in. This is the committee where the sanctuary city mayors of Boston, Los Angeles, or New York, and Denver have to answer for their policies. Mike Johnson has taken this so seriously. He spent $2 million hiring a top law firm in order to prepare him for this. And we are hearing that Lauren Boebert is going to be one of the very first people to ask questions. We're going to carry this live on broadcast and on X and YouTube and Rumble, so you can watch it all there and listen to it via broadcast. But you're not going to want to miss this. Getting word right now, Lauren Boebert is going to be one of the first people to ask questions.
Oh, that's fantastic. And we are going to bring it to you live. We'll get to the phone lines in just a second. Want to know what your highlight was from Donald Trump's speech last night, 303-696-1971. I got to tell you, Jeff, if one of those mayors doesn't go ahead and start running and at least make some sort of a reference to a bell and yelling out, "Sanctuary!" I'm going to be really disappointed. And my Hunchback of Notre Dame fans will appreciate that one. I want to jump to the phones right now and talk to Brian from Arvada. He gave us a ring, 303-696-1971. Good morning, Brian. What was your highlight from Donald Trump's speech last night?
I think all the accolades to the citizens that have been impacted, death of a family, the firefighter who died during the assassination attempt, and a shout out to his family, naming that wildlife area after that other young lady that was murdered. The Lincoln Riley Act, that was a beautiful moment for me, and especially the young man that got deputized by the Secret Service. That was just an absolute highlight, and hugging the head of the Secret Service. The low light obviously was the Democrats and how pathetic their performance was. An absolute disgrace to the country and a disgrace. And that's the problem. You hate a man so much, you cannot celebrate. I mean, they did a quiet little golf clap for some of the victims, but turning their head and not even looking at them, it was pretty sad. And all the way across, if you're voting for these people, you're voting for disrespect. You're voting for just an appalling display of humanity.
I got a question for you, Brian.
And that's who the Democrats have become.
I got a question for you.
Become.
Do you hold the same critique on Republicans that disrupted Biden's speech and, in a lesser degree, Obama's speech? Do you hold the same criticism, or is this predicated on party affiliation for you?
I hold the same criticism, absolutely. But, Billy, we saw nothing like what we saw last night. My wife is a moderate. She was appalled. My kids aren't even political, and they were appalled. They turned off a lot of people and showed their true colors. Have Republicans interrupted sometimes? Do we hold signs up disrespectfully during a congressional address? No. Do we not clap for people who, if Biden said he wanted to work with us on law enforcement and first responders, Republicans would definitely clap. They wouldn't turn their head and golf clap. That's the difference.
Well, here's the thing.
That's not even comparable.
Well, here's the question.
Not even comparable, Billy.
Here's the question I have for you, Brian, on that one is the idea of a continuum. If we go back to Joe Wilson and the first time that he yelled at Obama, you lied. What I see is a slow increase in what has been done by the opposite party, the party out of power, over the course of these speeches, that every year you have to have one-upsmanship. You have to do something that's going to create more of a stir than the year before. And so what I would submit is that when we get a Democrat back into the White House, the Republicans will again one-upsmanship. I would not be surprised to see Republicans show up with signs. I would not be surprised to Republicans not applauding. I wouldn't be surprised in a Republican yelling to get thrown out of the House, because there were several Republicans that stood up and yelled at Joe Biden during his previous speeches. So the idea that this is brand new behavior, for me, we've been slow walking this. We have been expecting this, and I think next year there's going to be in one-upsmanship, and a year after that, because in order to get the cameras, in order to get the viral moments, you have to go bigger than you did last year.
Billy, and you know what? You're making an assumption. We witnessed something tonight that was the most appalling we've ever seen in a presidential address. So if you want to say, well, Republicans are going to do it, well, let's wait till we cross that bridge. Let's talk about this bridge we're on right now. Appalling, inhumane behavior. Saying Lauren Boebert saying, say her name, and somebody yelling, you lied, is minute compared to the inhumanity we saw last night and the disdain for this country and first responders and victims that we saw from the Democrats. Absolutely disgusting behavior.
No, see, I disagree.
And not
I disagree,
even comparable.
Brian. I disagree.
Comparable, Billy.
I disagree.
Of course
because,
you do.
No, I disagree because the previous year, when we saw the behavior with Joe Biden, it was the same thing. It was the most extreme behavior we had ever seen. We'd never seen such a lack of decorum inside of the speeches before. That's been what's happening every year. Every year, that critique can be made. And that's why I talk about the idea this is just what is going to happen. This is what we, as an American public, have decided is okay, because we don't punish either side for it electorally. They don't lose anything by doing it. In fact, what they get is a viral moment the next day. In some ways, we incentivize it. And so it has to be bigger. So every single year, we could go back and say, we've never had a lack of decorum like this inside these speeches before. We've never had people not applaud for this before. That has happened routinely, and all it is, it becomes a one-upsmanship. And so the Democrats are going to have to do something bigger next year and the year after that. And when the Republicans out of power, they're going to have to go bigger as well. Otherwise, they're not going to get the social media clicks, and they're not going to get the viral moments. They're going to be played on TV the next morning.
Yeah, well, this does cost votes, Billy, and the last election is absolute proof of it. And the Democrats are doubling down on failed policies and failed attitudes.
Hold on.
And so it did cost votes. And this is going to cost them even more votes. I hope they keep doing it.
I got to talk to you about that. Hang on a second. I got to talk to you about the last votes. The last speech, the last president that delivered a speech in front of Congress was of which party? He was a Democrat. He was a Democrat. Yeah, Joe Biden. And which party is in control now?
They weren't as disrespectful as they were this time.
I know, but the issue is the disrespect. So I disagree with you with the disrespect losing votes, because there was disrespect by Republicans last time. It is not. I agree with you. It is not to this level, but every year it gets to a new level. So for me, when you say it cost them votes, I disagree, because our most recent history lesson is that the Republicans won and were able to expand the votes. So that would be 180 degrees away from your assertion.
Their attitude towards Trump has cost them votes, not just to disrespect her in his speech. Their entire attitude towards him and his policies cost them votes. And last night, publicly, they doubled down on that. And they're just blinded. But again, they're losing moderates, and I hope they keep acting this way and lose them left and right.
I didn't hear a lot of people post-election talk about the fact that it was the Democrats hated Trump so much, and that's why I voted for him. I heard it was immigration and economy. Those were the voting issues. It didn't have anything to do in the post-election analysis that I was hearing about the fact that the Democrats were mean to Trump, and I felt bad. So I didn't like the Democrats being mean, and so I went over to the side. They showed him disrespect. And if you talk about disrespect, I would throw things like, Donald Trump standing there and calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. That is meant as a term of disrespect. And he's been doing it for years. So I disagree with you on the idea that it costs votes based on the disrespect. I think they're playing to the side. I don't think it wins votes, but I don't think it costs votes. I don't think there's anything that shows us it costs votes.
First responders don't post. Families of victims don't post. They don't publicly call out these people because they're not worth the salt, their weight in salt, or they're not even worthy to lick their boots.
Well, let's
talk about
first
responders and people with proud victims. They don't post things. All they do is they sit there and watch people disrespect their fallen loved ones, and can't even respect a young man who has suffered from brain cancer, from chemicals we don't even know, and we're trying to protect our children from, and they can't even respect that. That's disgusting.
I am not familiar
and people
enough.
Don't have to post it to fill it, and it put a shockwave to all the moderates in this country. That is who wants your vote.
Okay, let's talk about this, Brian. Let's talk about this, Brian, because you're talking about first responders and respect. Donald Trump talked about defending police and taking actions to defend police while standing in the Capitol, where on January 6th, MAGA supporters beat police officers. Beat them to the point that they were injured, and some of them had to retire based on their injuries. Beat them to the point that some of them have PTSD. So, what do you think if you're one of those?
What percentage of the crowd was that, Billy?
No. Hang on.
What percentage of the crowd?
Wait, hang on, Brian. What you were
asking?
No, Brian. It is a smaller percentage than what was there. But what your premise was that these first responders that see this disrespect from the Democrats are then going to vote for Trump. And what I'm asking you about is, what does it say to those law enforcement, those people that wear the uniform, when Donald Trump inside the Capitol says he's going to protect police, but he pardoned the people that showed up and beat the police? I mean, when he says he's going to protect violence against police, should we assume, based on his actions, that we're going to protect the police against violence until the person committing the violence puts on a red hat? Then that person can be pardoned, correct?
Well, I mean, that's just a broad sweep, because the minute people that attack the police after the D.C. cops, who aren't Trump supporters anyway, removed barriers to allow people to go into the Capitol and open doors for them.
Brian, you're incorrect. They were Trump supporters.
Those are bad cops, number one.
No.
And bad cops and good cops hate bad cops.
Brian, hang on a second.
Number two, Billy, the minor amount of violence that occurred towards D.C. police compared to all the people that were there, that's what you want to pick out? Yeah, maybe he shouldn't have pardoned those minute percentage of people. Less than 1% of the people that were there caused violence.
He did.
Okay, but that's the small amount.
He pardoned them. I know, but the small amount gets the attention. And that small amount,
it gets your attention, Billy. It doesn't get moderates' attention.
Oh, okay.
No,
so
it does not.
You don't think moderates were concerned at all about MAGA supporters beating police officers? None? None at all?
I think they're more realistic than left-wingers who can say, you know what, this was a small percentage of people. Trump said peacefully go down there. And
he also said fight. He said fight 21 times. He said fight 21 times.
We don't even know we're Trump supporters.
We can go through this over and over again. He said fight 21 times. He said peacefully once. So on balance, he said fight a hell of a lot more times. He also said he was going to be there. He wasn't there. He was standing in the Capitol, the place where police officers were beaten, and then had the audacity to say that he was going to defend police officers. To me, that's outrageous. And if I'm wearing the uniform, I got to look and I got to question, how much does he really support me? Because if the person that is going to commit violence on me then puts on a red hat, do they get a pardon? I'd be curious about your thoughts. What was your highlight of the evening? What was the number one thing you'd point to that said this is the best thing that Donald Trump did last night? Brian, thank you so much for the call. He dialed 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Jeff and Bill on Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS. Good morning. You're listening to Denver's Talk Leader Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS. Bill Thorpe with you right now. Jeff Hunt is getting a primo seat inside of the hearing room where Denver Mayor Mike Johnston has got some splaining to do later on today. He's being called on the carpet for his support of sanctuary city policies. He's there with the mayors of Boston, Chicago, New York. Lauren Boebert is going to be one of the first people that's going to be asking Mayor Mike questions. We're going to bring you as much of the hearing as we can live right here on Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS. Right now, though, we're talking about Donald Trump's speech in front of both houses of Congress last night. Thing I want to know is, what's your highlight? You talked to someone that missed it. They were busy. They were working, just got up from a coma, arrived from the moon, wherever it is. And you say, you've got to see this last night. I want to point you to this. What is your number one highlight? Just had a conversation with Brian back and forth. He liked the idea of all the accolades to Americans. But we also went into it a little bit about Donald Trump and talking about the police and protecting the police while standing in the Capitol where Trump supporters beat police. And that's the reason that Paul from Denver gave us a call, 303-696-1971. Wanted to continue the conversation. Good morning, Paul. What's on your mind?
Good morning. The January 6th deal keeps being brought up. There were very few people that were violent there. But if you're going to talk about J6, why don't you talk about the George Floyd
that's fair.
And all the police officers across the country and all the violence and damage to America that they did. And Trump made a broad stroke when he wiped those people clean. Not everybody there was violent. And so he made a broad stroke and he pardoned most of those people.
Yeah. What about
you agree?
Yeah. And I think he did a broad stroke, and I think it was dumb. I think it was stupid, and I think it was disrespectful. I think there were absolutely people in that group that could get a pardon, and it seemed reasonable. But then there are others, like the members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. They were convicted of seditious conspiracy. Why they get a pardon? I'm confused, because that's an organized effort to overthrow the government. Those dudes? I totally agree with you about Black Lives Matter, and I think not enough people that were involved in violence with Black Lives Matter were held accountable. I don't think in any way, shape, or form. I think there were 15,000 over the country that were arrested and actually faced charges. There have been several thousand that are serving, 5 to 7 years for certain things they did. But did they get all the people that were agitators? No. And I do agree with you that it is a small percentage of people that were there on January 6th that got out of hand and created the problems for everybody else. But I want to go back, Paul, just for a second and talk about your impression of Donald Trump standing inside the Capitol where police officers were beaten by MAGA supporters and Donald Trump talking about defending the police. What are your thoughts about that? Is there any irony to that statement?
Of course, there's a little irony to that, sure. But I think on a broad stroke, he's taking care of the police officers. A lot of people after the George Floyd incident, it was hard to get police officers to even go to work. Nobody was supporting them. They wanted to defund the police all the way across the board. Oh, God, and he's trying to reverse that. He's trying to fix that.
Dude, I'm glad you brought up the idea about defund. That was for just phenomenal mistake by the Democrats. That I don't know who workshopped that phrase, but that was just stupid. Nobody wants to defund the police, and it's a dumb statement. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. Now, question about this: I've seen it floated by I'm using this word myself, not yours, Paul. Co-president Elon Musk has floated on his social media site the idea of pardoning Chauvin, the officer who was held responsible for the death of George Floyd. Would you support a pardon of Derek Chauvin?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't pardon that guy. He went through the court system, and he's been punished. And something that people forget is that guy was not charged for a hate crime.
Good point.
The whole country thought it was a hate crime, but the man was prosecuted by a black DA, and he didn't get charged. He got charged for murder, but not a hate crime.
Yeah. Dude, Paul, thank you so much.
People forget about that. They want to talk about it. They want to make sure it's a race issue because we love to spin up the race issue.
Do we ever?
Yeah. Yes.
Hey, Paul, thanks. Have a
Hey,
great
good
day, man.
job.
I sure appreciate the phone call. Love how Paul thinks. Reasonable. And yeah, he's right. I think he's right about Chauvin not being pardoned. And he's right about not many people on Black Lives Matter being held to account the same way, given the level of violence as well. We're going to check in with Jeff here in just a second. I've got an update from him. But first, we got to pay some bills. Give me a call, 303-696-1971. What do you think about Trump talking about defending police while standing in the Capitol? And what was your highlight of last night? This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS. morning. You're listening to Jeff and Bill live. This is Bill Thorpe. I am back in Denver. Jeff is in the room. Yeah, we're going to be able to on the YouTube's, Rumbles, Twitters, that places. We're going to share with you a picture that Jeff has. He has got an amazing seat. Yeah, I don't know what kind of karma Jeff has got right now, but dude's got an amazing seat inside. He is going to be right up where the action is when Denver Mayor Mike Johnston has to face the music from Lauren Boebert and the rest of the congressional hearing members about sanctuary city policies. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston is being called on the carpet along with the mayors of New York, Boston, Chicago. We are going to bring you the hearing live. Jeff is in the room, and we will get his eyewitness account tomorrow. He can't talk with us on the phone right now, so we're getting text messages and pictures from him, and just saying that Jeff's in the room, and someone from a TV station with a sport coat stuck in the hall just saying that, you know, who's got stroke, and this is my man Jeff Hunt, and the other guy from the show with the cool sport coat and the big wardrobe budget stuff. No, he's in the hall. He's in the hall. So, yes. Oh, hey, why is that going? That should not be going. Let's stop that. Okay, there we go. That's not good. How did that happen? What is that still playing? I got music that's playing in the background. Speaking of music, what we're going to do is we will start talking about what you expect from Mike Johnston. We're talking about the hearing. I also want to spend some time with you talking about your reactions to Donald Trump's speech in front of a joint session of Congress last night. What was your highlight? What is that moment that you would point to someone and say, hey, you've got to see this, you've got to hear this, you'll be impressed with what our president said. 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. But first, Blake Olson, news and commentary. Good morning, Blake.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Hey, good morning, Billy. 29 and sunny. It's actually a little bit warmer than that right now. Expecting a high of 53 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story, Denver Mayor Mike Johnston will face the House Oversight Committee in a few minutes to discuss sanctuary cities. Jeff is there. And as he reported earlier, Lauren Boebert will ask some of the first questions to the mayors.
1 counties in our country, 2,700 to 525, on a map that reads almost completely red for Republicans.
And the president went scoreboard early in the speech last night to remind the losers what happened. He knew that they'd sit on their hands all night, and they did, even when a young man named DJ, who's been fighting brain cancer and wants to become a police officer, was recognized. The lefties could not even applaud for him.
And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
Then he hugged Sean Curran. What a great moment. Unbelievable. And then a rodent named Nicole Wallace had to go on messy NBC and try to ruin the moment. Pretty sick.
I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer.
Oh, wow,
but I hope
thanks.
he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
Because you lied about January 6th, calling it worse than Pearl Harbor or 9/11, instead of what January 6th really was, the FBI guided tour of the Capitol building.
Nicole Wallace is sick. Democrats are out of touch with reality, and how do Americans feel?
To the results. What was your reaction to Trump's speech? 44% of speech watchers in our instant poll tonight say they had a very positive reaction to Trump's speech. 25% somewhat positive, 31% negative.
But it still blows me away what has occurred, especially the last 4 years alone.
And we have ended weaponized government where, as an example, a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent, like me. How did that work out? Not too good. Not too good.
One of the great moments. It was the longest address ever to a joint session of Congress. He talked about bringing Ukraine to the bargaining table with Russia, sweeping tax cuts, energy independence, getting rid of woke in government. VP Vance is headed to the southern border today. He'll visit Eagle Pass, Texas. Tariff compromise deals with Mexico and Canada could be announced soon. That's according to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He said the possible agreements would see a scale back of the 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico that went into effect Tuesday. Good. Canada coming to their senses. A bounty hunter is heading to prison after allegedly kidnapping and assaulting a woman he was supposed to take into custody. 49-year-old Jesse Wagner was sentenced to 5 years behind bars Friday in Jefferson County. He accepted a plea deal in January that dropped all charges except weapons possession by a previous offender and illegal use of a stun gun. LeBron becomes the first player in NBA history to score a combined 50,000 points in the regular season and the playoffs. The Nuggets and the Kings tonight, 23 in Brighton, 24 in Centennial, 26 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Only a fantasy this morning where Mike Johnson has paid a silk stocking law firm in D.C. to prep him to face Lauren Boebert and the rest of the congressional committee that is asking questions about Denver's sanctuary city policy. Jeff Hunt, my partner, is live in D.C. He's in the committee room. He is sitting down. He's got a primo seat. I don't know, what kind of karma he's got, but it's absolutely amazing. So he's going to be texting me information, and we are going to bring you some of the information and some of the testimony from the committee hearing when it gets started. Until then, you are stuck with me. Yes, my apologies. This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS, the Jeff and Bill Show. I'm Bill Thorpe, still here in Aurora, while Jeff does all the political stuff back in D.C. And I'm just saying that Jeff was in the room and stuff, and there's another show with a guy that wears a sport coat in the evening, and he was in the hall. So we got in the room, and the other guy's stuck in the hall. Now he's going to be in the room. He'll be in the room. He'll be in the room. But we were first. Nah, I like that. I like that one a lot. We're talking about Donald Trump and the speech last night between the joint session of Congress and what you saw as highlights, what you liked. If you had a friend that missed it, what would you tell them they have to watch? Joan from Lakewood called us and said she really loved the moment when Donald Trump announced the capture of the terrorist mastermind behind the Abbey Gate bombing that took the lives of American soldiers and injured up to 42 people. Paul called us and talked about BLM and protests and had some questions about when he was talking about protecting cops. And then Brian talked about the accolades to average Americans. And we've also been talking about the optics that we've seen from many of the Democrats not standing, Al Green standing up and actually getting kicked out of the session. I'm wondering if that is going to come back. Will the Democrats decide to extract their pound of flesh the next time they're in charge and kick the first disruptor out of the session the same way? I think that is highly likely the next time. And I don't think they have to do what Al Green did, which was disrespectful and absolutely was interrupting Donald Trump and should not have been doing it. But I don't think the bar is going to be that high. I think the Democrats will look for anything like you sneeze too loudly, get out of here, kind of a thing. Also, do you think that those protests, the Democrats are winning any votes? What I appreciate of both Paul, Joan, Brian that called in earlier today was the idea that it was incredibly disrespectful and it's a bad look when the Democrats didn't stand up and applaud the young 12-year-old that was named a member of the Secret Service after surviving brain cancer. That's just not right. And I can't for the life of me figure out why any politician couldn't celebrate that, why you couldn't have the decency to stand up and applaud. You're not necessarily applauding the Trump administration. You're letting this little boy have a moment. And what makes me the most upset, and I haven't shared this right now, is that what makes me the most upset is you've got a 12-year-old and his memory from that day, something he's going to be able to tell, God willing, his kids and grandkids about. Part of the image of that is half the chamber on their butts. That resonates. That's a memory that he's going to carry with him. And that hurts because it should be a memory of him being celebrated by the entire chamber. How cool was it that both sides stood up and they both cheered for me and they didn't. The Democrats, in my opinion, in an instance of moral failure, didn't stand up and applaud the young boy. But I also think that this is where we are. This is where we are getting with our politics right now, that you can't applaud something in this type of a scenario that the other party is doing, even if it is celebrating a boy who has beaten brain cancer and giving him something that he desires. It's a make-a-wish moment for the kid, and you can't applaud that. I mean, I'm a professional wrestling fan. Imagine if, one of the wrestling shows brought out a Make-A-Wish kid and half the crowd booed him. That's what I got out of it. It was bad form by the Democrats, amongst a whole bunch of other things. But sadly, I think this is where we're going. I think that those type of things are what's getting attention. Those type of things are what we see on TV and on social media the next day. And so that's how you gain traction. You gain traction not by acting like a reasonable adult. You gain traction by acting like a middle schooler. And I think that every year you're just going to have to one up what's going to happen, because otherwise it doesn't get attention. If the Democrats next year with Trump's speech don't make an equal sort of an outburst, it's not going to get attention because of what it's being judged against. And I think that's a problem. When we talk about the idea of the degradation of decorum and the degradation of our politics and how we approach things, I think that's part of it, because these are the things that we pay attention to. And yeah, do I admit that the show this morning, I'm part of the problem? Oh, hell. Yeah, absolutely. But if you've been listening long enough to the Jeff and Bill show here on KNUS, I'm part of a lot of problems. Yeah, I'm sort of the problem child of the Salem radio family. Give me a call, 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. There were some things last night as we were waiting for the committee hearing to start. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston going to have to justify being a sanctuary city and justify those policies in front of Congress. Committee hearing, granted. But of course, what do we expect here? We're going to expect the same thing we saw last night. The Democrats are going to come out and pat Mayor Mike on the head and talk about why he's the bestest and most wonderfulest boy and how they're super proud of him. And if we could give you a gold star and a plate of milk and cookies and give you a tuck you in at night, we would. But the Democrats are going to talk about him not necessarily being the prodigal son. That's not the right Bible story, but the idea of him being someone that doesn't respect America, that puts the priorities of illegals over the tax-paying citizens of Denver. And they're going to have that with the mayors of Boston, New York, Chicago as well. That's how this is going to play out. But are we going to come to any conclusions, or are we just going to be making speeches? So that's what I want to know. Also, 303-696-1971, what did you like about Donald Trump's speech last night? What were the things that really, really resonated with you? There was something I wanted to point out real quickly as we're getting some text messages from Jeff. He's like, nothing is happening inside the room yet. Things look good. But, and we're going to share some pictures on the video with you as far as where he is. But the question I've got is, last night, Donald Trump talked about an interest rate drop. And he did just talk about one. He was talking about long-term securities. The 10-year T-bill interest rate dropped. That was the only interest rate. You're not seeing, the Fed's not dropping interest rates. In fact, they're holding right now, despite what Donald Trump said should happen. But he highlighted the idea of the 10-year T-bill rate dropping. Is that a good thing? It's not. This is the problem. That a couple of weeks ago, we created an inverted yield curve, which means short-term securities have a higher interest rate than long-term securities. So 3- and 5-year T-bills offer a better percentage interest rates than 10-year Treasury bills do right now. That's a problem. And the reason it's a problem, I don't get too geeky into the economics of it, but it is a likely indicator of a recession. When you have an inversion of the yield curve, more times than not, that signals a recession is coming. Does it mean we are going to have a recession? No. But it is a strong indicator that economic policies that exist at this moment can lead to a recession. We just recently had the Atlanta Fed talk about a drop in GDP of 1.6%, and they've upped that to 2.6 in the last 48 hours, 72 hours, I think now. And so they're looking at a swing of negative 2.6 GDP growth. That's from a positive of around 2.6. That's a swing of 5 points. That's a 5-point swing from positive to negative with GDP growth. Is this the golden age of America? If we get negative GDP growth in this quarter and the next, that's an official recession. 2 negative numbers in GDP growth for 2 quarters in a row is a recession. So is the golden age of America going to be, in part, characterized by a recession? Tariffs are going to increase prices. One thing Donald Trump didn't talk about last night is how he's going to lower prices. That surprised me. There was almost nothing in economic relief for the average man and woman in America. But that was one of the top reasons, if not the top reason, that people voted for him. Depending on the poll, it's immigration or the economy. The economy. It was all about Biden didn't understand how hard people are struggling. So where was the message from Donald Trump last night to help the people that are struggling? Prices of eggs going up. The odd thing is, the Trump administration has a plan to try and lower egg prices. It may actually work in the short term in some areas. There are some things to it that could help, but that wasn't outlined. And that's, I've got some questions about that. What do you think about the golden age of America? He said we are ushering in the golden age of America. But does that include you and I paying higher prices? Tariffs say so. If we're talking about lumber, Canadian lumber just got more expensive. That's going to make housing prices higher. There's part of this where, I don't know if I want to go into it, the idea of hard assets getting more expensive while goods and services becoming less expensive. And this is a trend that's happened over the last decade and more, where hard asset prices, things like land, houses, gold, those prices are going up while other prices for goods and services fall. Prices for TVs, your cell phone, sometimes going to the restaurant. Now, it doesn't mean it's fallen, at a huge rate, but it's become more affordable. Then what I mean by this is, with few exceptions, you can go out there and buy a TV that is just as good as what Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg could buy. But you can't go out there and buy the assets. You can't go out there and buy the land, buy the company, buy the buildings, buy the yachts. I could buy yachts or goods and services, so that's a bad example. But you can't invest. You can't go out and buy an office building. You can't go buy your own island. You can't do things like that. Those are harder assets, and those prices have been going up. But you can go out there and buy a TV, in most cases, that's not that much different than what those millionaires and billionaires put on their wall. And that's the separation that we've seen inside of our economy, the separation between the haves and have-nots. And I was looking for something last night from Donald Trump that was going to lift up the have-nots, that was going to give the average person in America a chance to close that gap. And I didn't hear it. And continuing Trump's tax cuts, I don't believe is going to do that. But what do you think was the highlight of Donald Trump's speech last night? For me, I did like the capture of the Abbey Gate terrorist. I agree with Joan in Lakewood. That for me was a surprise and a highlight, and that should have been celebrated by everyone because regardless of how you feel Joe Biden dealt with the withdrawal in Afghanistan and how the table was set for him, what happened there, the people responsible needed to be held to account. And I feel it was a failure by the Biden administration to not make that a priority and to put it front and center, even if it was just lip service at times, that we could have been able to get through that. But tell you what, I'm going to step aside for just a moment, and I'm going to connect with the committee hearing in just a sec. And then when we come back, we will check in with the hearing and see what Jeff says. We'll be back and see what Mayor Mike Johnston of Denver is telling the congressional hearing in just a minute. This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS, The Jeff and Bill Show. there, this is Bill Thorpe, Jeff and Bill Show. Jeff is live in the Congressional Committee room where Mayor Mike Johnson is about to give his opening statements. We are going live to Washington, D.C. on 710 KNUS.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for inviting me to
That's
testify
Denver Mayor
today.
Johnston.
This committee convened this hearing on the critical topic of immigration. I want to tell you Denver's story. When I became mayor 20 months ago, Denver was already receiving buses of immigrants with little to no notice or coordination. At one point, we were receiving 10 to 11 buses a day, dropping off as many as 300 people, mostly women and children, in 10-degree weather with only sandals and a T-shirt, leaving them in danger of freezing to death on our streets. All told, 42,000 people arrived in Denver over 18 months, the largest per capita influx of any city in America. We are each entitled to our own opinion about what should happen at the border, but that was not the question facing Denver. The question Denver faced was, what will you do with a mom and 2 kids dropped on the streets of our city with no warm clothes, no food, and no place to stay? As mayor, I have to protect the health and safety of everyone in our city. As a man of faith, I have a moral obligation to care for those in need. As Scripture says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." So that's what we did. In Denver, we believe our problems are solvable, and we are the ones to solve them. So we went to work. When we started, we had the largest encampment in Denver history, with more than 200 migrant families living in freezing temperatures. So we opened 8 different city shelters housing 5,000 people. City employees volunteered to take extra shifts, and Denver residents stepped up, making meals, donating clothes, furniture, school supplies. Some even welcomed families into their own homes. We helped 8,700 eligible individuals apply for work authorization so they could put food on their own table, pay their own rent, and reduce the strain on public resources. As a result, a year later, there is not a single migrant encampment left in the city. We have closed all of our shelters. We have connected people to jobs and housing, and the city's immigrant support budget has dropped by nearly 90%. And in the midst of this, migrants did not bring a wave of crime to Denver. In fact, crime went down. Homicides dropped 17%, shooting victims dropped 24%, auto theft down 29%. America is not just a place, it's a belief. Some people are born into it, some fight their whole life to get to it. It's a belief that all are created equal. It's a belief that it doesn't matter where you came from if you're willing to fight hard enough. Julian Becerra's parents believed that. So they brought him to this country from Mexico when he was 10. They taught him respect, and they taught him to love and serve his community. As an adult, he decided the most honorable way to serve his community was in uniform. So he enlisted in the Air Force. Then he served as a sheriff, then finally as a police officer, where he served with distinction until one day he was pursuing a criminal on a dangerous bridge and fell to his death. In the midst of the immigration crisis, I attended the Fallen Officers Memorial as I watched officers hand Officer Becerra's 10-year-old daughter a folded American flag. I watched her cry as she wrapped her little arms around that flag and holded it tight the way she wished she could hold her dad, but never will again. For the rest of her life, she will cherish that flag, that American flag, because it is the country that her dad loved, it is the country he chose, it is the country he served, it is the country he gave his life for. So if we want to tell the story of what impact immigrants have in America, we must tell the full story. That story must acknowledge that this country is lucky to have people like Julian Becerra, who love this country enough to risk their lives to keep us safe, to keep all of us safe. When buses started showing up filled with migrants, some in my city were afraid, just like I'm sure some of your constituents are afraid. They were afraid about crime and homelessness and worried about what these new people might take away from them. I understand that fear. And the truth is, people who are new to this country do good and bad just like all of us. But there's another truth. When those buses kept on coming, Denver made a choice as a city, not to hate each other, but to help each other. Not to turn on each other, but to turn to each other. And see if together we could solve a problem that felt bigger than any one of us. And that's what we did. It wasn't perfect, and it required sacrifice from all of us. But in the end, Denver came out stronger and closer than we were before. Because Americans expect us to do more than point fingers. They expect us to solve problems.
Denver Mayor Mike
So if Denver
Johnston
can find a way to put aside our ideological differences long enough to manage a crisis we didn't choose or create, it seems only fair to ask that the body that is actually charged with solving this national problem, this Congress, can finally commit to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize Chicago Mayor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Comer. Thank you to the ranking member, Connolly.
We're going to stick with this for just a second. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show live committee hearing. That was Denver Mayor Mike Johnston on 710 KNUS.
The third largest city in the nation. Established by a black Haitian man and a Potawatomi woman, Chicago is and always has been a proud city of immigrants. Generations of new arrivals, including the descendants of the enslaved during the Great Migration, created a vibrant city where 1 in 5 residents is foreign-born. Each day, I wake up to serve every one of Chicago's 77 unique neighborhoods and those who live in our great city. As mayor of Chicago, nothing is more important to me than the safety and well-being of all residents. And since I was elected, my administration has been laser-focused on creating and implementing public safety initiatives that protect all Chicagoans. We launched the People's Plan for Community Safety, which builds trust between communities and law enforcement by prioritizing transparency and violence intervention. We established a dedicated robbery task force that reduced robberies by 25% citywide. We added over 200 detectives, increasing the clearance rates on our cases. And we've updated police equipment and technology so that our police officers have the tools they need to effectively prevent and fight crime. Our efforts to improve public safety by building trust with and investing in our communities are working. Violent crime is down in Chicago. The city ended 2024 with its lowest homicide rate in 5 years. The city is also safer because of our Welcoming City Ordinance. That law makes sure that the city's police resources are focused on our local priorities. In fact, the 40 years of Chicago's leaders have recognized that our policies toward civil immigration matters help to prevent and solve crimes. Put simply, any actions that amplify fears of deportations make Chicago more dangerous. Those fears cause witnesses and victims to avoid cooperating with police. The cooperation of all people, regardless of their immigration status, is essential to achieving the city's goals of reducing crime and pursuing justice for victims. When there is trust between city's residents and the police, undocumented immigrants come forward to report crimes to local law enforcement and provide information that helps the police solve those crimes. And now, I know there are myths about these laws, but we must not let mischaracterizations and fear-mongering obscure the reality that Chicago's crime rates are trending down. We still have a long way to go, but sensationalizing tragedy in the name of political expediency is not governing, it's grandstanding. Every violent crime is devastating, but scapegoating entire communities is not only misleading, it is unjust and it is beneath us. So let me be clear. Chicago's Welcoming City Ordinance and our other laws and policies do not lead to more crime. They do not prevent cooperation with federal law enforcement on criminal matters. And we do not harbor criminals. We arrest them, often because of laws that allow residents to feel safe helping the police. As mayor, I'm building a Chicago that embodies the dream of my father had when he came from Salis, Mississippi during the second migration, a Chicago that invests in housing, healthcare, jobs, and education. And that's why we've increased safe and stable housing by adding almost 4,000 more units, expanded access to health care by opening 3 mental health centers, and focused on getting our young people well-paying jobs, with summer jobs increasing by 45% since I've taken office. Our local partnerships have built a solid foundation, a better, stronger, and a much safer Chicago. We need this body's support for these efforts. We are ready to partner with you on the measures we know promote trust and create sustainable public safety. And to the people of Chicago and all hardworking people across this great nation, these values are our North Star, the drinking gourd we follow to a better future. We will not live in fear. It is not our portion. We will not go back. I do look forward to answering the questions of this committee.
The Jeff and Bill Show live. You're listening to the Congressional Committee hearing about sanctuary cities. Mayor Mike Johnson of Denver spoke earlier.
Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Connolly, and members of the committee.
This is the mayor of Boston.
My name is Michelle Wu. I am the daughter of immigrants, and since November of 2021, I have had the honor of serving as mayor of Boston. I'm proud to be here on behalf of our city, the police officers, first responders, city workers, the faith leaders, teachers, parents, and neighbors who partner every day to make Boston the safest major city in the nation. And I'm proud every day to work alongside the greatest police commissioner in the nation, Commissioner Michael Cox. Every year since I took office, we've set a new record low for gun violence in Boston. Last year, Boston saw the fewest homicides on record in the last 70 years. Those are the facts. And behind these record lows are historic highs. The most ever young people working paid summer jobs, the most pre-K seats at no cost to families, the most affordable housing built in a generation. We have invested in the kinds of opportunities that cultivate prosperity and eradicate crime. And the laws on our books promote the kind of community trust that keeps all of us safe. In Boston, our police department resources and taxpayer dollars go towards preventing and solving crimes. And when it comes to criminal matters, the Boston Police partner every day with state and federal law enforcement. But Massachusetts state law and the Boston Trust Act make clear that immigration is federal law enforcement's responsibility. We are the safest major city in the country because our gun laws are the strongest in the nation, because our officers have built relationships over decades, and because all of our residents can trust that when they call 911 in the event of an emergency or to report a crime, help will come. This federal administration's approach is undermining that trust. In the past month, I've met with residents and faith leaders in community centers and places of worship, asking my constituents what they want Congress to know. And what I heard over and over again was fear and frustration. I spoke with pastors whose pews are half empty on Sundays, doctors whose patients are missing appointments, teachers whose students aren't coming to class, neighbors afraid to report crimes in their communities, and victims of violence who won't call the police. This federal administration is making hardworking, tax-paying, God-fearing residents afraid to live their lives. A city that's scared is not a city that's safe. A land ruled by fear is not the land of the free. Next month, Boston will celebrate 250 years of our nation's freedom. And in every one of those years, Boston has welcomed the world to our shores. From the English immigrants fleeing religious persecution, to the Irish forced out by famine, to the families from Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cabo Verde, Vietnam, and so many more who call Boston home today. We are the safest major city in the nation. We are home to the greatest healthcare, the greatest colleges and universities, the most advanced innovators, and the 2024 world champion Boston Celtics. We are the cradle of democracy and the city of champions. We are all of these things not in spite of our immigrants, but because of them. 1 in 7 signers of the Declaration of Independence were immigrants. On the last 4 Red Sox rosters to win a World Series, 1 in 5 were immigrants. Of all the faculty at Boston University to have earned a Nobel Prize, all but 1 were immigrants. Today, 1 in 4 Boston residents were born somewhere else. Most have jobs, many have kids. All of them chose this country as their home because, like my mom and dad, they believe that here, where you've been doesn't limit where you're going. The strength of your character has nothing to do with the color of your passport. And how hard you work matters more than where you were born. That wherever you're from, if you pitch in, look out for your neighbors, and cheer for the home team, you can build a better future here for the people you love. So to every one of my neighbors back in Boston, know this: you belong here. This is your home. Boston es tu hogar. Boston, 是la calle. 这是你的家. This is our city. We are the safest major city in the nation because we are safe for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Beer for his opening statement.
Chairman Comer,
You're
Ranking
listening
Member
to
Connolly,
the
and distinguished
congressional
members of
hearing
the
on
committee,
sanctuary
thank you for the
cities.
opportunity
Denver Mayor
to
Mike Johnston
testify.
spoke earlier. This is
The
710
Cato
KNUS.
Institute's half-century of independent research demonstrates that people of all races, religions, and birthplaces can thrive in a free society. Liberty must be protected, both from over-intrusive government and from private violence. Unfortunately, the president's chaotic, indiscriminate deportation plan does the opposite. It harms public safety, threatens Americans' rights, and undermines the successful integration of America's immigrants into its society and economy. The president's first action was to rescind the requirement that ICE target public safety threats first. He has ordered that millions of vetted immigrants be stripped of lawful status and deported. He is even attempting to deport the U.S.-born children of people without permanent status. This flagrantly unconstitutional act effectively orders a series of crimes, wrongful arrest and imprisonment, civil rights violations, and unlawful deprivation of voting rights. Never before in American history has a president sought the power to strip potentially tens of millions of Americans of their constitutional rights. The president is also explicitly asserting the authority to ignore any law passed by you, Congress, that provides due process for people accused of being in the country illegally. The administration has repeatedly misled you and the public about who it is targeting, stating it would focus on public safety threats, that only the worst of the worst would be sent to Guantanamo Bay, and that every person it had arrested had a criminal record. We now know that most ICE arrests since the inauguration have been of people without a criminal record. Indeed, he is arresting people who entered legally, never violated any law, and sending them to Guantanamo Bay prison. It is no surprise in this lawless environment that many people and many cities simply do not trust the federal government on immigration. That is a problem. But under our Constitution, states determine their policies. Congress cannot force them. It must reestablish trust. Unfortunately, some members of Congress want to force an indiscriminate policy of mass deportation on the entire country with no public safety focus. If Congress wants more cooperation, it should address the concerns of these cities. What Congress should do is reestablish trust. Indiscriminate mass deportation agenda is a far greater threat to public safety than any city policy. A mountain of empirical research shows that reasonable restrictions on ICE cooperation do not increase crime rates, and that immigrants lower crime rates. Immigrants, including illegal immigrants, commit crimes serious enough for them to be incarcerated at half the rate of U.S.-born Americans. Data from Texas shows that illegal immigrants are 36% less likely to commit and be convicted of murder. At least before this current mass deportation effort, immigrants were more likely to report crimes than U.S.-born Americans. Don't jeopardize that. Mass deportation is diverting law enforcement resources away from obtaining justice for victims. Indeed, it even targets the victims. Sabotaging local economies and obliterating communities will not restore public safety. It will make us poor while increasing the crime rate and victimization rate for Americans. There is a better approach. We don't need chaos and disorder of illegal immigration or of mass deportation. Why don't people come legally? Because Congress has provided so few options for them to do so, not updating its laws in the last 3.5 decades. Just 3% of those applying for permanent legal status in 2024 received it. That's the failed policy. Let peaceful immigrants pay to get vetted, work, and contribute legally. And let law enforcement at all levels focus on keeping Americans safe. Thank you.
That's David Breyer, Cato Institute. You're listening to the congressional hearing about sanctuary city status. Denver Mayor Mike Johnson is there. This is 710 KNUS.
Members today that are going to ask questions. So I'm going to strictly enforce the 5 minutes. I'll hit the gavel if anyone's still
okay, between you and me, let's see if he enforces that.
Allow the witnesses to answer the question, but let's please be mindful. We have a lot of questioners today for this very important hearing, and again, we thank the witnesses. I'll recognize myself to begin questions for 5 minutes, and I have limited time, so I want to start with a simple yes or no question, and I'm going to hold you all to that because after the
now I know that Lauren Boebert is going to be asking questions. Comer said that he's got 5 minutes right there, so we are going to step aside to make sure. Oh, wait, he's asking Mayor Johnson. Hang on.
From assisting and cooperating with any investigation, detention, or arrest procedures related to federal immigration laws. The city also stated that federal immigration authorities shall not be granted access or allowed to use the secure areas of any city or county jail. Mayor Johnson, is Denver a sanctuary city?
A lot of folks use that term.
Yes or no?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Folks use that term differently. I can tell you what Denver does. We do not.
Okay, I take that as a yes. Mayor Johnson, no, yes or no? I take that as a yes. Mayor Johnson, on March 10th, 2023, you posted on
That was interesting. I know Lauren Boebert is coming up, so we're going to step aside. You're listening to the congressional hearing live from Washington, D.C. My partner, Jeff Hunt, is in the room. We'll get his reaction tomorrow. This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS. to Denver's talk leader, the Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS. We are bringing you live coverage of the congressional hearing about sanctuary cities. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston is in the room. Eric Adams from New York. Johnson, the mayor of Chicago. Mayor Wu of Boston was just answering questions from the ranking member, Mr. Connolly. We are now moving along and going to bring you the hearing live. My partner, Jeff Hunt, is in the room.
Playing by the rules, paying taxes. There is no one that is seeking hell to come to Denver. What people are looking for is opportunity and hope.
And for the record, he can do whatever he wants to do, I guess. But the fact of the matter is you absorbed on a per capita basis the largest immigration a year or two ago, and you indicated that your crime rate actually fell. It didn't increase. Is that correct?
That is correct. Crime is down in Denver. We have homicides down 17%. Violent shootings are down 24%.
And in Boston, I'm sorry, I've got limited time. Mayor Wu, same thing in Boston. The Boston crime rate has been falling, correct?
We had 24 homicides last year, 24 too many, but that represented a tremendous reduction, one of the biggest drops anywhere in the country.
Thank you. So the correlation between immigration and crime is false, as you point out, Mr. Beer. Perhaps you can elaborate that. I find it ironic that you characterized correctly, in my view, President Trump and Tom Homan's approach to immigration as lawless when they're invoking law and order and crime as the rationale for their lawlessness. Could you expand on the lawlessness and the irony of the fact that, as you point out in your testimony, the crime rate among immigrants is half that of the native population?
That's right. I have a table in my written testimony that you can look at. Top 20 cities for immigration court filings over the last 4 years. 19 of those cities saw a decline in their homicide rate. If you look at all of the major cities, there is a negative correlation between increasing numbers of immigrants and the homicide rate. So that means more immigrants, lower homicide rates. That holds true across the United States. So I think the correlation that's trying to be made is more immigrants, more illegal immigrants, more chaos, more crime. That does not hold. What we do see under this administration is an increasing willingness to ignore the laws. He has, as I mentioned, signed an executive order that says he can ignore due process rights for people who are accused of being in the country illegally. This is an incredibly dangerous assertion of authority and should be investigated by Congress.
And is it a reasonable proposition for a local leader? I know I was chairman of my county, which is like being mayor of a large county, and you know, we focused on local law enforcement. You know, we tried to help the feds when we could. We were cooperative where we could be, but our job was local law enforcement. And there is a clash when ICE behaves this way, and I described some horrible incidents. It instills fear in the immigrant community, and it fosters non-cooperation rather than cooperation, which is the mandate of each of these leaders, is it not?
Absolutely. We want cooperation. Many of these cities are the reason why immigrants are more likely to cooperate and report crimes to the police than the U.S.-born population is. So there are good reasons to limit this mass deportation of people in their communities.
I would just argue that the premise of this hearing is false. We have local law enforcement cooperating with the local political leadership, and it's working. It's bringing down crime rates. And the proposition that immigrants cause crime is false, in fact, patently false, as your testimony, I think, would demonstrate, Mr. Beer. And the idea that these are sanctuary cities that need to be punished is simply a war on urban America. And I'm proud of the mayors who are in front of us here today, and I thank them for their testimony, and I thank them for their service to their local communities.
We're going to call an audible here. I am going to switch back to the hearing. Hang on a a sec here. All right, we're going to call an audible. Lauren Boebert is asking questions right now in the committee hearing. We're going back to Lauren Boebert live.
Detainers, end quote. I've demanded Governor Jared Polis and the Colorado State Legislature to repeal them. Douglas County has led on a lawsuit to get those laws repealed. So, Mr. Mayor, would you join me today in calling and demanding that these sanctuary policies, these Colorado state laws, be repealed?
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Yes or no, Mr. Mayor?
Pardon?
Yes or no? Will you join me?
I do not believe the detainer law needs to be changed. I can tell you what Denver
Okay, so
does
you
right now.
don't want them to coordinate with ICE, but yet you're blaming the state of Colorado for those policies. It's a statewide law. It's not a Denver law. And you're blaming the state of Colorado for the law, yet you will not call for that law to be repealed. Correct? Yes or no?
We do coordinate with ICE presently. I'm happy to tell you what we do on that. So we've honored detainer requests more than 1,226 times over the last
What about
years.
before a warrant? There are many issues before a warrant.
So what happens is if ICE sends us a detainer request,
Well, you have local law enforcement officers, Mr. Mayor, who are unable to coordinate with ICE to even get the initial warrant. They aren't allowed to tell them that they are illegal aliens. So unfortunately, you won't join me in asking for this law, demanding that this law be repealed. So let's keep going. In 2017, Denver passed an ordinance that ensured any city employee who spoke with federal immigration authorities would be fired, among other policies that have led to local and national media outlets to call Denver a sanctuary city. So now let me ask you, would a city employee be fired for communicating with anyone from the EPA?
Right now, Congresswoman, our policy is we don't ask people's status.
Would any city employee be fired for communicating and coordinating, talking with an agent from the EPA, a federal employee?
Not to my knowledge, Congresswoman.
What about Health and Human Services? Would they get fired for talking with someone from Health and Human Services?
Not to my knowledge, Congresswoman.
So they would only be fired for talking to federal law enforcement officers?
No, that's incorrect, Congresswoman.
This is an ordinance
city employees do,
Denver
in fact,
passed in 2017, Mr. Mayor.
Our city employees do, in fact, communicate with ICE. We do coordinate on multiple things with ICE. For instance, if there is a violent criminal warrant in the city, we pursue that
we're
warrant
talking
together.
before the warrants, Mr. Mayor. There are issues happening before warrants are issued, and local law enforcement officers are unable to coordinate because there is no warrant. And your ordinance says that a city employee would be fired for communicating with federal law enforcement. So you've been mayor for 600 days. Have you ever called for that ordinance to be repealed?
We are not unable to coordinate with ICE right now. We're in communication with ICE right now.
Only if there is a warrant, but I'm talking prior to the warrant.
We wouldn't have a reason to coordinate.
Because you don't know if they're illegal, because you are unable to coordinate until there is a warrant. So that's why this ordinance needs to be repealed. So now the 600 days, there's been no time to ask for this to be repealed. You did have a newcomer's playbook, 25 pages. You had time to put that together. And you had time to agree with the city council to authorize up to $2 million to pay Joe Biden's former lawyer, his law firm, to help cover your ass for Denver's sanctuary city policies for this hearing, correct?
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have counsel.
Did you authorize that spending?
We have counsel to support this committee's investigation into any documents you may have. That is a year-long contract for the 13,000 city employees.
And your budget
you may
is
request documents from.
seriously declining. Denver Magazine reported that Denver has spent $7.5 million on shipping illegal aliens to other destinations. Mayor Adams, did Mayor Johnston ever coordinate with you and tell you that he was shipping illegal aliens to your city?
We coordinated in communication around the entire asylum seeker issue in our cities.
So I've heard that Denver crime went down. Well, Aurora's crime went up because you were also shipping them to Aurora. And we have documentation that I don't have time to discuss here in this hearing that proves you were shipping illegal aliens to Aurora. Their crime was increasing while you were hiding under laws that you will not demand be repealed, ordinance from your city. And then crime was going up from Trinidad Aragua gangs vandalizing apartment owners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. and I hope that we can get this
We have a
resolved in
5-minute
Colorado.
rule, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, gentlelady's time's expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington.
All right. Now, what we're going to do after Lauren Boebert finished grilling Denver Mayor Mike Johnston, we need to finish a commercial break, and then we will check in with Blake Olson, news and commentary. You are listening to live coverage of the Sanctuary City congressional hearing. My partner, Jeff Hunt, is in the room. I'm Bill Thorpe. This is Jeff and Bill on Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS. Bringing you live coverage on the Jeff and Bill show of the congressional hearing about sanctuary cities. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston is there. Eric Adams, mayor of New York, is there. Johnson, the mayor of Chicago. Wu, the mayor of Boston. David Beyer of the Cato Institute, all there testifying, and my man Jeff Hunt live in the room. He's going to bring you his personal reactions to all the chaos. We just heard Lauren Boebert giving the what for to Denver Mayor Mike Johnston. Hope you enjoyed that. We're going to check in and continue the hearing. But first, we are going to check in with Blake Olson for news and commentary. Good morning, sir.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Hey, thanks, Billy. Good morning. 35 and sunny in Denver, expecting a high of 53 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story.
In Denver, we believe our problems are solvable, and we are the ones to solve them. So we went to work. When we started, we had the largest encampment in Denver history, with more than 200 migrant families living in freezing temperatures. So we opened 8 different city shelters housing 5,000 people.
Denver Mayor Mike Johnston in front of the House Oversight Committee in D.C. to answer questions about sanctuary cities and how that destroys communities like here in Denver. Jeff is there taking it all in. He's part of he's watching Johnston's opening comments, and now they're into the questions. You just heard Lauren Boebert and more of Johnston on his opening comments.
When those buses kept on coming, Denver made a choice as a city, not to hate each other, but to help each other, not to turn on each other, but to turn to each other, and see if together we could solve a problem that felt bigger than any one of us. And that's what we did. It wasn't perfect, and it required sacrifice from all of us. But in the end, Denver came out stronger and closer than we were before, because Americans expect us to do more than point fingers. They expect us to solve problems. We didn't choose or create. It seems only fair to ask that the body that is actually charged with solving this national problem, this Congress, can finally commit to do the same.
You created the problem, the left, globalists, Democrats. Why? Why? Because they wanted to overthrow the United States with Democratic votes. That's what happened. Bottom line, they're up there making excuses right now.
Illegal border crossings last month were by far the lowest ever recorded, ever. They heard my words and they chose not to come. Much easier that way.
Last night in the joint session speech, DJT said the word of mouth is helping a lot with the border after he sent the message, and he reminded everyone about all the corruption and fraud Doge has discovered, and told RFK Jr. he's amazed by the ages they're seeing out there in the United States. We are really healthy.
130,000 people, according to the Social Security databases, are age over 160 years old. We have a healthier country than I thought, Bobby.
Ukraine President Zelensky sent DJT a letter and says he wants peace in Ukraine. No way.
It's time to stop this madness. It's time to halt the killing. It's time to end this senseless war. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides. Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible.
Economist Martin Armstrong said last night that former UK leader Boris Johnson actually coached Zelensky up 2 days before he visited Washington to play hardball with DJT. That didn't work out for the globalists from the EU, did it? Part of the revolution or counter-revolution has been combating woke.
Our country will be woke no longer. We've ended the tyranny of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all across the entire federal government and indeed the private sector and our military. What I have just described is only a small fraction of the common sense revolution that is now, because of us, sweeping the entire world. Common sense has become a common theme, and we will never go back.
32 in Westminster, 33 in Lone Tree, 35 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Jeff in D.C., Billy in Denver. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS. Talk 710 KNUS. We are bringing you the Congressional Oversight Hearing live. Lauren Boebert just gave the what for to Denver Mayor Mike Johnston just a little bit ago. Jeff Hunt is live in the room, but everybody got to be all quiet and can't talk and stuff. So we're going to go right back. It is Jim Jordan going after our mayor.
This is the whole point.
No, sir, I disagree with you.
Oh, okay.
Because I'll tell you why. What if you talk about sanctuary as a definition of shielding people from law enforcement, we do not do that. What we do is provide services. In this context, what we did is we coordinated the release.
An officer got assaulted because of your policy, which says we're going to release him to, in your words, not mine, to the streets. They have to arrest him in the parking lot. They bring 6 officers when they could have had 1 or 2 just come in your facility, in the jail, and take the guy there. But you won't do it that way.
I've seen the video. I've reached out to ICE. I've offered to sit down and coordinate on strategies. If we need to make adjustments to what we do on releases, we'll do that. This is the first time in the 1,226 releases
You know,
I've
I read your written testimony last night. I read your written testimony last night. 4.5 pages. And you used the words safe, safer, or safety 13 times. Talking about my job is to protect the safety of the people in Denver. We prioritizing making sure everyone in our community is safe. That's a lie. Because it was not safer for the ICE agents who are part of your community. No way was it safer. The safest thing to do is to say, ICE, we got him in custody. Come here, we're releasing. We held him 345 days. We can't hold him a second longer. We can't wait for you to come inside the building. We got to let him go, so you have to arrest him in the parking lot. That is how stupid sanctuary policies are and what they mean to the community that you put at risk and to the ICE officers ICE officer who was assaulted. And they had to use a taser on it's not good.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
5 minutes is up.
Consent request.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Conley. I want to thank the panelists for your willingness to come before the committee and help us with our work. You know, I truly believe that if we had a rational and comprehensive immigration policy in this country, if we competently regulated the flow of immigration, if we knew the purpose and circumstances of each immigrant's arrival here, and if every immigrant knew what was expected of them when they arrived, I honestly and truly believe that immigration could be the greatest blessing for our country. Look at our world rivals, China and Russia. No one is trying to sneak into China, sneak into Russia. It's because of what we offer here as a nation. There is a substantive issue that's at play here. And I want to address that. So under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the Constitution, it provides Congress, and I'll read the section here, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. And Clause 18 further provides that Congress has the power to make all laws that shall be necessary and proper to execute its enumerated powers, including immigration. So it appears that Congress has taken up that responsibility in the Immigration and Nationality Act, which they exercise under constitutional writ. On the other hand, we have local so-called sanctuary city laws that at times, so those sanctuary cities laws tend to address local cooperation with federal authorities in your jurisdictions, within your cities. And sometimes it does appear that the sanctuary city laws are defending against the congressional grant of authority to operate in that area. Now, you all, as mayors, and I ask this of the entire panel, you deal with this every single day, and we've heard some of it in your testimony eloquently. How do we, as lawmakers, we're struggling with this right now. There's a tension between that authority of Congress to act under Article 1 of the Constitution, and then your responsibility, nobly taken, to provide a safe environment for the residents and visitors to your cities. How do we reconcile, and I'm asking you for advice. You have a great perspective on this. How do we together reconcile the tension between those two operating systems, grants of power? And I'd welcome any advice you have on that, because that's what we are struggling with up here in terms of trying to come up with a comprehensive immigration policy that addresses all of these concerns. Mayor Johnson?
Congressman, I'm happy to start the response. We obviously believe there is a federal system that has federal obligations and state and local obligations. We think, as Mayor Wu said, that our officers are uniquely prepared, trained, and ready to enforce local law and to keep our city safe. We want to focus on that. We do not have the capacity for our law enforcement to be doing federal immigration enforcement, but we want to be partners in making sure we're pulling violent criminals off the street. We do that now. We've done it in the past. We'll keep doing it. But we think the capacity for the federal government to focus on.
But what I'm trying to point at is this. So the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, rode into office on this issue. On this issue. He put people in fear. I'm in a state that's 2,400 miles from the border. We're going to spend $1.5 billion on providing services and housing and everything to people who are in our state unlawfully. He got into office on that issue. So the costs to democracy are massive. It is now threatening our democracy because we have mishandled this issue. So we need to get together on this and turn immigration, like I say, into the greatest blessing that this country has, and not something that people are afraid of. That's the challenge.
May I, Congressman?
Please.
This may be the last
Oh, my
blue.
friend.
This may be the last blue dress I'm wearing this month. It's going to be green from here on out as we celebrate Irish American heritage back at home. Please pass comprehensive immigration law that is consistent and compassionate. That will make our jobs possible, and we would so appreciate that partnership.
I hear you. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes.
You're listening to the Congressional Hearing Oversight Hearing on Sanctuary Cities. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston is there, along with my partner Jeff Hunt. This is 710 KNUS.
Proceed.
Okay, I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record thousands of DHS agents shift to deportation instead of drugs, weapons, and human trafficking. That is February 2025 USA Today.
Without
Also,
objection, so ordered.
Parents pull kids from childcare as immigration fears hit U.S. youngest.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair.
Finally, an 11-year-old girl in Texas died by suicide after she was bullied about her family's immigration status, her mother says.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Dr. Gosar from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Wu, I'll be showing up at your house tomorrow with my bags at 5 o'clock. Leave your doors unlocked, please. What are you making for dinner? Because I expect a warm meal and a balanced diet. Now, I'm going to need a car, and please leave me some cash because I'm going to need to go to my doctor's appointment on Friday. That would be to Mr. Mayor Johnson. Now, I don't want to sleep on the couch, so put me up at a luxury hotel. The other Mayor Johnson. Obviously, you wouldn't like this because you don't know me, right? You know nothing about me. You might not like that. Sanctuary cities offer this kind of hope, this false hope to illegal aliens by saying that very thing. Stay with me. We don't tell anybody that you break our laws. Now, thank you. You've made the United States complicit and one of the largest purveyors of human trafficking in the world. Thank you. You're disgracing the legal immigration system that came here and the immigrants that came here the right way, through Ellis Island at the time, now through our going through a process. And I want to talk about that process because I've always been told, and it's never been really challenged, is that good process builds good policy, builds good politics. I think that works really, really good because you can always fall back to the process. If the process isn't good, you always get a good process. Now, you heard the word establishing trust, okay? How can you establish trust at the very beginning when you have a false narrative here? You're defending folks who have broken the law. The definition I've always looked at is trust is a series of promises kept. What kind of trust are you supporting here? What is the trust with an illegal alien? It's a false hope. It's a false trust. Welcome. We're bringing you in. It's disorganized process. Now, let me ask you a question. Mayor Adams, did you support SB 1070?
I'm sorry?
Did you support the Arizona law called SB 1070?
I'm not familiar with it, sir.
Well, let me explain, okay?
Mm-hmm.
SB 1070 challenged the federal government on its supremacy clause. Because we, in Arizona, wanted, the government wasn't doing anything, so we thought, we'll do this. We can't allow them to break laws. The Supreme Court ruled that struck it down. Now, it seems contraindicating here that you would have supported SB 1070, right, Mary Adams? Based on the premise that you or would you violate the supremacy clause in regards to immigration?
Would I
violate the supremacy clause?
This is way over my head.
Okay.
I felt law.
That's
you know.
Mr. Mayor Johnson, would you have supported SB 1070, allowing Arizona to follow their own laws? Because that's what you're doing right here.
Thank you, Congressman. We currently follow all federal law, all state law, and all local law. So we do not have any supremacy clause challenges that we're pursuing or maintaining.
Okay. Well, it seems like you are. But Mr. Johnson, do you agree?
The city of Chicago complies with all laws.
Okay. Mayor Wu.
I'm not familiar with that law because I'm focused on the city of Boston, but we follow all state, city, and federal laws in Boston.
What happens when you get in conflict with them? Who do you support?
The Constitution, as I understand it, doesn't require cities or police officers or anyone to follow their laws in conflict, follow federal laws in conflict with local laws or state laws.
Okay, in the Constitution it says, and it's explicit, that the federal government has jurisdiction and supremacy over all immigration laws, right? I mean, I've heard it a number of times from my colleagues over here. We're the ones who can define that. We're the ones that have that. We just heard we want a comprehensive immigration policy. How can you get a comprehensive immigration policy when you're defining it from the very get-go? You're building it on false premises and false tenets.
Respectfully, Congressman, you could pass bipartisan legislation, and that would be comprehensive immigration law. The false narrative is that immigrants in general are criminals, or immigrants in general cause all sorts of danger and harm. That is actually what is undermining safety in our communities. If you wanted to make us safe, pass gun reforms. Stop cutting Medicaid. Stop cutting cancer research. Stop cutting funds for veterans. That is what will make our city safe.
Yes, thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Chris Morty from Illinois.
Congressional oversight hearing on sanctuary city policy.
Mr.
Mike
Chair.
Johnson,
Mayor
Denver mayor, in the room. Hope everybody caught the
Chicago
irony
and
of
its enforcement
Mayor
of laws
Adams
to
in New
rid
York
communities
saying he
of
doesn't
criminals.
understand the
I
law.
want to give you a chance to address some of these questions. First, Mayor Johnson, the city of Chicago operates under 4 sets of laws: federal, state, county, and of course, Chicago's own laws, right?
That is correct.
And most of these laws are not within Chicago's sole power to change. For example, the Illinois Trust Act, a state law, was enacted in 2017 by then Republican Governor Bruce Rauner and dictates interactions between ICE and law enforcement, right?
That is correct.
And under Chicago's own law, I have a copy of it right here, Chicago is required to help ICE whenever ICE presents a judicial criminal warrant for an arrest, correct?
Yes.
In fact, Chicago has assisted ICE with criminal warrants in the past, right?
Yes.
So just to clear it up, any time that ICE does the work and goes to a court to get a criminal warrant.
Well, this is just cheerleading. You're listening to the Congressional Oversight Hearing on Sanctuary City Policy. I'm Bill Thorpe, the Jeff and Bill Show. Jeff Hunt is live in the room, but he can't use the cell phone at this time. So we are going to check in with him tomorrow and get his reaction, but he will have eyes on the scene for you tomorrow morning. Until then, we will keep covering this congressional hearing. Mayor Mike Johnson, hope you caught it when Lauren Boebert gave him the what for earlier today. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show, Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710, KNUS. News Talk 710 KNUS. I am Bill Thorpe here in the studio in Denver. Jeff Hunt is live in the committee hearing room in Congress, Washington, D.C. We are going to check in with the oversight hearing on sanctuary cities. This is Mayor Johnson of Chicago responding. Mayor Mike Johnston is in the room as well.
Was the result of the governor of Texas, not the result of a welcoming city ordinance.
welcoming city ordinance. So you're not welcoming these people that came here illegally?
The individuals that were bused to us from the border. From
They were
Governor
not
Abbott.
welcome in Chicago? You didn't welcome them? You didn't provide them sanctuary?
So the welcoming city ordinance is pretty straightforward. It allows for our local law enforcement to focus on local policies, and that's why we're seeing a decline in violence.
So you
in the
don't
city of
care
Chicago.
about federal law enforcement policies, only local policies?
We comply with all laws. What I do care about is this body, Washington, passing comprehensive immigration
So let me ask you this. Chicago residents reported 28,443 violent crimes during 2024 alone, cases of aggravated assault rising to the highest level in 2 decades. Now, also, state funds, $160 million, were issued to illegal alien job assistance shelters in Chicago. You're the mayor of Chicago. Do you think that your residents or the residents of your state should be paying for that more than they should be paying for their own needs, their own roads, their own public safety? I mean, who elected you? The people that came illegally, whether they were sent to you or not, or the people that reside in Chicago? Who elected you? And who do you serve?
The people of Chicago elected me as the 57th mayor of the city of Chicago, and we serve all the residents of the city of Chicago.
Illegal or not, criminal or not. How many of the 662,566 illegal aliens with criminal histories that ICE has reported are now residing in Chicago?
Someone will have to get back with you with that number. I don't keep account
Do you take immigration information from criminals as they're arrested and processed? Do you take immigration information?
Our local law enforcement focuses on getting all violent individuals off the streets
Do you determine whether
of
they're
Chicago.
here legally, what their immigration status is as a function of your justice
Gentlemen,
system?
time's expired, but please feel free to answer the question, Mayor.
The welcoming city ordinance ensures that our local residents communicate and trust local law enforcement to ensure that criminals and crime is being addressed, and
you
that's
have
why
no
violent
idea how
crime
many are illegal.
has
Thank
gone
you,
down
Mr.
in the
Chairman.
city
I'll
of
yield.
Chicago. Thank you very much,
Chair
Congressman.
now
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Chair now
Mr.
recognizes.
Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
I'm sorry, Ms. Presley.
I have unanimous consent request.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record. Mass deportations would deliver a catastrophic blow to the U.S. economy. This is from the Joint Economic Committee, December 2024.
From where? What publication?
The Joint Economic Committee, December 2024.
Without objection, so ordered.
I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record from the American Immigration Council, October 2024. Mass deportation, devastating cost to America, its budget and economy.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Khanna from California.
Mr. Chair.
Wait, I'm sorry. Mayor Wu needs a short break to attend to her young child. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I got the note that the baby's okay for now, so I'll continue. But thank you. I will. I believe from my husband that the baby's okay, and
okay, well,
and the arrangement, if it's okay, was that everyone would take a break, so I wouldn't have to go into a back room by myself to nurse when it's time. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Khanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I find the Republican position in this hearing quite ironic, because the Republicans are the party that are always touting local government, state government, local control, and not having federal overreach. So I want to explore actually one of your favorite topics on the other side of the aisle, the infamous mask mandates. I know how much you love them. When CDC came out with the mask mandate order of January 29, 2021, they said that we needed to have fines of $1,500 for anyone who didn't wear a mask on a plane or in a public space. And they said that there needed to be referred criminally to the Transportation Authority if they violated it more than once. Now, Governor Abbott said in Executive Order 38, we're not going to enforce, we're not going to have our cities enforce the mask mandate. And Governor DeSantis said the same thing. We're not going to have our local police enforce the mandate. I want to ask Mayor Adams and Mayor Wu, because you had slightly different views on the mask mandate, but Mayor Adams, you were actually praised in New York for saying we are going to take away some of these mask mandates earlier so businesses can open and there can be a revival in New York. Did you ever, in law enforcement, to your knowledge, enforce the CDC mask mandate and ask your law enforcement to fine people who didn't wear a mask $1,500?
What we did was looked at the science and looked at how it will impact business, and after issuing warnings in education.
But I think it's fair to say, Mayor, right, you never referred anyone to the Transportation Department for prosecution, and you never had local police out there saying we're going to fine people $1,500 with the CDC mandate.
The goal was to always ensure that people will carry out the procedure, and we did several education and warning in the process.
Mayor Wu, you were a great advocate of masks and looked at the science. Do you know if your city government actually ever used police resources to carry out the CDC or Transportation Department's mask mandate where they were fining $1,500 or referring for criminal prosecution?
I am not aware of any incidents of someone in Boston having been fined or prosecuted for any mask-related issues. We certainly prioritize public health and saving lives, and so our role as a city was to provide positive communication, outreach, make sure there were signs and different community organizations that could go and remind people to stay safe and do their best to take care of each other and their families.
As much of an advocate as you were for masks, and I was an advocate for masks, would you have been hesitant to order your law enforcement, your local police, to say if someone was violating those mask mandates that we need to cooperate and turn them over to the Transportation Department for prosecution? Would that have given you some pause if the federal government were saying use your police departments to fine people $1,500 and give us their records for criminal prosecution?
Yes, it would have.
And so I guess I'm trying to understand, you know, if we set this precedent that we want cities to be enforcing every federal mandate, then what happens when there's a new Democratic president that comes and says we want a mask mandate that the Republicans may not want? And when there are conservatives like Governor DeSantis or Governor Abbott saying we don't want our cities to enforce that. Do you see, Mayor Wu, any difference between a federal government asking you to enforce laws that ICE is doing versus a federal government asking you to enforce a mask mandate or, frankly, to enforce gun laws that may not be what your local city department is focused on?
It does seem that local authority is part of our democracy and part of our system of government.
Isn't the real issue here not one of immigration, but of federalism? Isn't the question, I mean, everyone agrees that there needs to be, if there's someone who's convicted of a crime, that ICE has the right to enforce those laws. The question is just, are you going to have local governments in this country be beholden to every new president's directives and an arm for enforcing that? My view is that we ought to have local governments be able to use their police officers for their priorities. That, in its essence, is federalism, and it actually used to be the conservative Republican position.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Johnson, in the last 4 years, how much has Chicago spent on care for illegal aliens?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. So since 2022, since the governor of Texas began shipping...
Just tell me a number. I don't need a speech. Just tell me a number.
So since 2022, since the governor of Texas was shipping individuals to cities across this country, the city's budget, roughly 1% of the city's budget over the course of 4 years.
Mayor Johnston, the same question, and I don't need a speech, just a number.
Thank you, Dr. Congresswoman. Thank you, Congresswoman. It's $79 million over the last 2.5 years.
Mayor Adams, same question. How much has New York spent to care for illegal aliens?
Approximately $6.9 billion went out of our taxpayers' funds.
Mayor Wu, same question. How much has Boston spent to care for illegal aliens in the last 4 years?
We do not ask about immigration status and giving city services and providing that access, so we do not have a number.
Taxpayers have been bearing the brunt of the massive wave of illegal aliens who've entered the United States. The Biden administration seemingly declared taxpayers and hardworking Americans collateral damage in the pursuit of open borders. Again, Mayor Johnson, are NGOs providing services to illegal aliens in Chicago?
In accordance with the Welcoming City Ordinance, our sister agencies or city departments, we do not seek the status of any individual that is seeking service.
Mayor Johnston, are NGOs providing services to illegal aliens in Denver?
Thank you, ma'am. When folks arrive on the streets without food or resources or shelter, we do provide food or shelter regardless of where folks arrive from.
Mayor Adams, same question.
Yes, in combination of city agencies and nonprofits, we responded to the migrant asylum seekers humanitarian crisis that hit our city.
And Mayor Wu, I assume you don't know their status, but do you know if there are NGOs are providing services to people arriving in your city without any kind of documentation?
There are community organizations, many of them in Boston, who seek to serve all of our Boston residents.
Congress must provide oversight and ensure accountability for taxpayer funds going to NGOs. Agents from Customs and Border Protection have been outspoken in opposition to allowing NGOs to assist illegal aliens in subversion of law and order. When asked if NGOs are working at cross purposes to the mission of Border Patrol agents, the chief of the National Border Patrol Council said, quote, "Most definitely, and they should not be allowed, but our government allows it," end quote. NGOs receiving taxpayer funding through grants pay for everything from food, shelter, and transportation to legal services that help the migrants traverse Mexico. That is why I introduced H.R. 245, the Grant Integrity and Border Security Act. This bill would require all NGOs who apply for a federal
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm really not interested in the law that Representative Fox wanted to introduce. And the Democrats doing political grandstanding. I'm enjoying the Republicans giving the mayors the what for. You're listening to Jeff and Bill Live. We are bringing you the oversight hearing going on in Congress right now where Denver Mayor Mike Johnston is having to face the music on Denver's sanctuary city policy. My partner Jeff Hunt is live in the room, and he's going to give you all the behind-the-scenes scuttlebutt tomorrow. But right now, we're going to step aside. You are listening to Jeff and Bill on Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS. Hearings on Sanctuary Cities Live. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston is there. They just went to the Chicago Mayor Johnson. Representative Brown was just making speeches. Speech. We got a couple more minutes to listen to this live. Jeff is in the room and will join us tomorrow with his reactions. This is Jeff and Bill, 710 KNUS. Back to the hearing.
Violent crime is down 20%.
That's Chicago Mayor Johnson.
Any type of threat to the civility and to the humanity of people is a threat to the evolution of our democracy. And so it's incumbent upon Washington to ensure that we are funding our education system, that we are funding our transportation system, our healthcare system, creating more jobs. Just since I've been in office, we've increased youth employment, summer jobs by over 40%. Making sure that our young people see their purpose is the value of this democracy. And so I call on this body to continue to invest in the city of Chicago that sends billions of dollars to Washington.
Thank you. Fear and cruelty are not the solution. It's distinctly un-American and a dangerous distraction from the Congress's responsibility to actually deliver progress on this challenging facing our country. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Grofman from Wisconsin.
Yeah, just a couple comments first. As far as the idea of who's committing crimes, we have how many illegal immigrants in this country are committing crimes because nobody keeps track. Okay, if I go to a prison or a jail in Wisconsin with, I don't know, 1,500 inmates, and I ask how many of these people are here illegally or how many are citizens of another country, nobody will know the answer to that question. So that's why we don't have hard facts on how many crimes people committed. The other thing I like to point out is every year in this country, about 850,000 new people from other countries are sworn in as American citizens. I don't know of Donald Trump ever talking about reducing that number. Maybe he should reduce that number, but I've never heard him talk about reducing that number. Our concern here was illegal immigration, and I would hope the vast majority of Americans think we ought to have a immigration law, that the 850,000 new citizens every year go through. But if we're going to have an immigration law, it means we have to do something with the people who try to become permanent residents without going through the proper structure. Now, I think part of our problem here is we have a lot of people who don't understand why we have an immigration law at all. And I want to ask all four of you as I go down, we go down the row here, do you believe the United States should have an immigration law, or do you believe
this will be
that
interesting.
just anybody should be
We're
able
not going to
to
make it in
show up
30
and
seconds.
come in?
Let's see.
And we'll start with Mayor Adams there.
No, go to Johnson.
I strongly believe we need to have an immigration law. I strongly believe we need to secure our borders.
No, we gotta go to Mayor
witnessed a
Johnston.
90% decrease.
We're
and
running out of
seeing
time.
that
That's
play
the
out
end.
in our
This is Jeff and Bill. We are broadcasting live the Oversight hearing. You're listening to 710 KN.